Very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GBNews, broadcasting for you until 6 p.m. A huge story awaits today in politics. Top story today, of course, is this.
Bring forward a new plan for Britain. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again. The moment we bring back hope. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, Andy Burnham today was sworn in as the UK's 59th Prime Minister and our fourth in under just 4 years. Mr Burnham pledged to make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain and added, "I'll make politics work better." But will this northern takeover of turning Downing Street into Coronation Street have a happy ending, or will it be just another political soap opera? And during today's show, Andy Burnham will announce his first cabinet with a new Chancellor. Might Britain be thrown back to 1970s-style taxation? Might a new Home Secretary water down Shabana Mahmood's immigration clampdowns? Can a new Prime Minister chart a new course for Britain? Or is Andy Burnham merely rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? And we'll have full analysis throughout the show from the best in the business. Chopper.
We'll know soon enough, because I'm in Downing Street, where we expect the new cabinet appointments to start walking to the street around 4 p.m. today. Who's up, who's down? We'll find out very, very soon.
Well, following promises of more power outside of Westminster, we understand that Andy Burnham's number 10 in the north is fully operational as of today. We're here in Manchester gauging people's reactions.
Pass the baton to Andy Burnham. I wish him every success. He has my full support. My work is done.
My work is done, said Sir Keir Starmer earlier on today as he left Downing Street, and he insisted he had not been a failure just 2 years after that extraordinary general election landslide simply evaporated.
Reform are saying, if you really believe in these things, Andy, then put it to the British people. Write down your plan, put it in a manifesto. Let's have a general election.
Now, those with long memories will recall that in opposition, Andy Burnham was demanding a general election every time the Conservatives switched leadership. But Andy Burnham has refused to rule out a snap election as he faces mounting pressure to seek a fresh mandate for power. Oh no, not another one. Yes, we've got another Prime Minister, our fourth in just over 4 years. Andy Burnham today crowned unopposed. Nobody stood against him. There was no cross-examination of what he stood for, no policies and no questions allowed by the media. This afternoon, we will find out during this show who Andy Burnham's top team is. The top table will be announced. The Cabinet, who will take on the role of Chancellor. Shabana Mahmood is tipped to be the favourite. Well, in the past, she was hinting towards a 50p in the pound upper tax rate. And if she goes there, then who goes to be the Home Secretary? Shabana Mahmood promised a tough clampdown on immigration if she goes somewhere else. Who fill those shoes? Is it the poison chalice of Downing Street? Clamping down on immigration might please the Red Wall, but it might bring dismay to those Labour parliamentarians who are being eaten away by the Green Party. It's a huge afternoon in politics. We'll be there on the front line, and you will have a ringside seat with the best in the business. Get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so, or scan the QR code on your screens now. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Bethany Elsey.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. Your top stories at 3:03. Andy Burnham has delivered his first speech as Prime Minister from Downing Street, promising to call for a national sense of unity. And he also made tackling homelessness his first official policy announcement. Britain's 7th Prime Minister since 2016 has pledged to set out a 10-year plan later this year to bring down the cost of living.
Now, I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
It comes amid reports the new Prime Minister is also poised to take key industries like water into public ownership, as well as supporting new oil and gas drilling in the North Sea and scrapping Sir Keir Starmer's digital ID scheme. Earlier, Mr Burnham met with the King at Buckingham Palace, who invited him to form a government shortly after Sir Keir Starmer officially resigned.
Now pass the baton to Andy Burnham. I wish him every success. He has my full support. My work is done.
President Donald Trump says the latest strikes on Iran are in honour of American military personnel killed in the conflict. US Central Command says a service member died in an Iranian attack in northern Iraq on Saturday, a day after 2 soldiers were killed in a strike on a military base in Jordan. Another remains missing in action. America and Iran have exchanged fire for an 8th consecutive day after the ceasefire collapsed. The lawyer of Andrew and Tristan Tate says the brothers are being held in solitary confinement following their arrest in Miami. The pair are expected to attend a hearing at a US court today after British authorities issued 38 new charges against them relating to alleged sexual offences. They include allegations of rape and sex trafficking between 2010 and 2017. The Crown Prosecution Service has requested their extradition back to the UK. The Tates have previously denied any wrongdoing. And more than 2 million people will be subject to a hosepipe ban as the hot weather continues. South East Water says customers in Sussex, Surrey, Hampshire and Berkshire will be affected from Saturday, but the company is urging customers to cut back their usage immediately to safeguard resources. Those are your latest headlines. Let's have a look at the markets.
Taking the ups and downs in our stride. Stilts Home Lifts sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
The pound will buy you $1.35 and 1.18 euros. The price of gold is £2,980 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 10,548 points.
GB News Finance Report, brought to you by Stilts Home Lifts.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome to today's show. 3 hours of action-packed politics. Let's get stuck in. Andy Burnham has been crowned as Prime Minister as he vowed to make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain. And any moment now, get ready because we're expecting the new Prime Minister to start unveiling his first cabinet, who he said will deliver the biggest change in British politics for 40 years. Let's now speak with our political editor, Chris Hope, live there from Downing Street. Chris Hope, we've been saying all along, Downing Street has become Coronation Street. Not only was the Prime Minister crowned unopposed, it's a northern takeover. Now we can expect to see the first cabinet being rolled out. Chris, what do we know so far about the big names in the running?
So far, Martin, it's only speculation, but that will end soon enough. For right now, we think the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, Andy Burnham, forgive me, is making phone calls to the probably around 8 or so members of Sir Keir Starmer's top team who will be leaving the cabinet. We expect those names to include Richard Hermer, Steve Reed, who's the Housing Secretary, Liz Kendall, the Science Secretary, and others too. But the movement across government, we expect Shabana Mahmood probably to be made the Chancellor. That leaves a space, of course, at the Home Secretary's role to be filled maybe by Wes Streeting. We'll wait and see how that plays out. We're looking at Ed Miliband in the Foreign Office, Lucy Powell, maybe Deputy Prime Minister, Lisa Nandy nailed on for a super ministry. The Wigan MP, former Culture Secretary, should get a role running all of the devolution agenda of this new government, local government, housing and the like. Maybe Angela Rayner in her health, Jonathan Reynolds, the Chief Whip, back at business, Annalise Midgley, Chief Whip. Those are some of the areas. I'm hearing that David Miliband, yes, David Miliband, one of those greatest hits from the Blairite government and the Brownite government, he could be back in an unspecified role. The most surprising for me and it's only a rumour so far, not confirmed, is that Rachel Reeves could be on the move to defence. And that's because in order to move Rachel Reeves into a role which she may see as not too much of a demotion, defence might be a good place for her to start, because spending in defence has been so poor in recent years, criticised so much, billions of pounds of our tax money wasted by that department. Bringing a former Chancellor could work in getting a grip on spending there. She also briefed journalists on the NATO trip. She was there at the unveiling of the Defence Investment Plan. And of course, there's a £5 billion hole in that scheme. She knows all about that because she fought that scheme, or fought to bring it down, as it were, when she was the Chancellor in number 11 Downing Street. So that's also a tip I've had. We'll see if that plays out. All that drama will take place. For now, though, we're trying to scan all the social media channels, Martin, to see if any of the current team around Sir Keir Starmer have been told they're not required into Andy Burnham, and therefore saying they're leaving government. So I could be back at any point, 3 or 3 hours, but we're expecting those new appointments to start walking up Downing Street behind me from around 4 o'clock today.
Well, Chris Hope, when they start walking down Downing Street, make sure you act like a terrier and get them by the trouser leg. Get a comment out of them, Chris Hope. It's all happening very, very quickly. You're on the front line there. Chris Hope for us there on Downing Street. Now, let's bring in GBNews' Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. I believe he's joined by Reform UK Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick. Tom, no doubt Mr Jenrick has some choice reaction to today's announcement so far. Over to you.
Well, let's find out, Martin. Yes, Robert Jenrick with me now. Robert, first of all, we haven't yet heard who the Chancellor is going to be of the Burnham Ministry, but ultimately, what do you expect? Will there be a big change in direction compared to Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, it feels like it's more of the same, to be honest, at the moment. It doesn't feel as if Andy Burnham has a plan. He spent years aspiring to the job, a year plotting it, according to his aide, Louise Haigh, and yet we heard a lot of platitudes, didn't we, on the steps of number 10. On the economy, he said he cares about the cost of living, but he's not ruled out the tax rises that he's advocated for many years now. We totted them up and they come to £38 billion, or £3.5 grand for everyone in the country. And he's been toying between two very unenviable choices for Chancellor. Red Ed, who the markets don't like and think is just going to tax and spend even more, or Shabana Mahmood, someone who says that she doesn't want the job and has spent weeks trying to avoid it, and in 16 years in politics has said almost nothing about the economy. So it feels to me that there is no plan to fix the big challenges that are facing the country, and that leaves me very worried indeed.
You used to face Shabana Mahmood when you were Shadow Justice Minister, and yet it seemed you had quite a lot of respect for her. Is that respect diminishing? What do you think of her as a politician?
No, I like Shabana, and to the extent that we worked together, we enjoyed the sort of rough and tumble of politics across the dispatch box. But two things I'd say. One, if she leaves the Home Office, without question, it means that Andy Burnham is going to water down the immigration reforms that she was pursuing, which were trying to stop the Boris wave from making a permanent life here in the UK, and that should concern us. And secondly, she herself does not want this job. She has tried to avoid taking on this job as Chancellor. She doesn't say things about the economy, and when the country is in such a mess as it is right now, you want someone who's got a very clear plan. How are they going to increase people's living standards? How are they going to stop all these young people who are out of work being stuck on the dole or without any training? How are you going to get energy bills down so that we can reindustrialise this country and not see all the factories closing that we're seeing at the moment? And it doesn't feel like Andy Burnham or indeed Shabana Mahmood have any idea how they're going to do that.
Shabana Mahmood certainly hasn't spoken a lot about economics. She hasn't held an economic brief before, and her career before politics wasn't particularly in the field of economics. But I put it to you, Robert Jenrick, other than a short stint as a Treasury Minister, your background hasn't particularly been in economics either. That's not the job that you had before.
Well, actually it is. I worked in business. I ran a British business before coming into politics. I was a Treasury Minister. I was Housing Secretary who tried to build more homes. In fact, brought housing to the highest level it's been in yours and mine lifetime. So, yeah, I have thought about this very deeply, and I have a plan as to how we're going to turn this economy around. we're going to bring back good jobs to this country by getting energy costs down, by scrapping Ed Miliband's net zero nonsense. That's the only way we'll reindustrialise the Midlands and the North. We're going to lower people's taxes by cutting waste, getting billions and billions off the welfare bill, by getting the millions of people who are currently choosing not to work back into the workplace. Where does Andy Burnham stand on any of these issues? I think he's very conflicted and divided. He said over the weekend that he might get some of the old licences signed off for oil and gas, but not new ones. He said he cares about the cost of living, but hasn't ruled out significantly raising working people's taxes. He's acknowledged there's a big problem with welfare, but hasn't said how he's going to fix that. It feels like this is just more of the same, but dressed up with a whole load of platitudes and waffle on the steps of Number 10.
Of course, we haven't heard the big plan from Andy Burnham. He says he'll set out a 10-year plan in the weeks and months to come. But one thing he did mention specifically on the steps of Downing Street was he wants to rid the country of rough sleeping. I wanted to ask you specifically about this because this country virtually did do that at the start of 2020. You were the Secretary of State for Housing for MHCLG, Housing, Communities and Local Government. And you had a policy called Everyone In. That seemed to work in terms of getting everyone off the streets, but it was very expensive. It housed illegal migrants. Do you think it would be the right thing to resurrect that policy?
Well, Andy Burnham and I actually worked well together back in the day. I created Everyone In. We did get about 90% of the homeless people, the rough sleepers, off the streets and into accommodation. Some of those people drifted back onto the streets afterwards. It requires a huge effort across the whole country by central government working with local government. It's as much about housing as it is actually about mental health and addiction. And you've got to make sure the NHS is working with you as well. I will support Andy Burnham and I'll work with him if he wants to reinvigorate that massive effort. But it has gone backwards in recent times, including in Manchester, where the number of people sleeping rough has risen year on year over the course of the last 5 years. And it has become harder in recent times because we've got so many people coming across the channel illegally in small boats. And so remember, when you're helping people at great cost into a better future, at the moment it's not veterans, it's not just British people. Most of the people sleeping rough on the streets of cities like London are actually people who are not Brits at all. And that, I think, will stick in the throat of a lot of British people when you want to see that money, that national effort, going to help British people to have a better future.
So just to be clear, because of course your policy, Everyone In, it didn't regard previously, when people tried to deal with this problem, no recourse to public funds was a big barrier because illegal migrants or indeed people who hadn't got long-term settled status in this country were not able to be helped. Under your scheme, those migrants were able to be helped. Would you back a scheme from Andy Burnham that also spent that money on migrants, as happened in 2020?
No, and we didn't change the so-called no recourse to public funds rules, but we did make a decision during lockdown that we needed to get those people off the streets, both for their own protection, but actually for the general population, because we didn't want a group of people, whether they were British or migrants, who were likely to spread the virus. And so we got them all off the streets as quickly as we could. But despite a lot of lobbying from charities and left-wing organisations, we chose in the longer term not to change those rules. And why? Because scarce resources should be focused on Brits. You know, if you're talking about council houses, obviously they should go to British people. It's completely unthinkable that a British person, maybe a woman who's been a victim of domestic abuse, who's desperate to get a home for herself and her kids, should be behind someone who came across illegally on a small boat. No, that will never happen under reform. We'll always put British people first.
OK, Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed. Well, a lot that was covered there, of course, and we still don't know who the Chancellor is. But, Martin, I am certain that over the course of your programme, we're going to find out quite a lot more.
Marwood, superb. Thank you very much there, live with Robert Jenrick from College Green, and a strangely silent certain hat-wearing miscreant behind you. Thank you very much indeed there, Tom Harwood. Now let's speak to my next guest now. Delighted to be joined by the Labour Party MP for Chatham and Aylesford. That is Tris Osborne. Tris, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. We are waiting with bated breath for the top table to be announced. Can Andy Burnham really make a difference with the same people that were proven to fail under Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, look, we're all waiting, and it will only be a short time now before the announcement starts. And clearly, what the country now needs is a clear steer of direction with both experience but also new talents coming in. I expect that we'll see that shortly. But we also need to continue with the manifesto that we delivered. So growth in every quarter of the economy, falling migration. We've seen net migration fall by 82% since Conservative peaks and the Boris Way peaks that we've just raised. Falling NHS waiting lists and record investment in our hospitals, and really delivering on those public services. And just lastly, what we heard this morning was also clear commitment to challenge the cost of living issues that we all have and to tackle homelessness, which I think has really been a problem for many, many years now.
Yeah, Trish, we'll talk about that later on in the show, because Andy Burnham also promised to end homelessness in Manchester in 2017. He failed. He hadn't even done that by 2020, so it's doubled down on that on the national stage. We'll move on to that later on. But I want to ask you on a serious point. Taxation, taxation, taxation. The nation is bracing itself for some pain because the biscuit tin is empty. Unless Andy Burnham's going to chop down Jeremy Corbyn's magic money tree, there's only two ways of doing this: raising more money through taxation or borrowing more. And the country is broken. Are we going back to the 1970s, Tris?
No, I don't think so. And actually, the markets today are probably taking that sentiment with a barrel of salt, because they're not showing any signs of distress whatsoever. And that's the key indicator, actually. Second of all, we will await to see who the Chancellor is, and they will look at the spending envelope that we have. Clearly, there are challenges around international conflicts around the world. But we'll also be looking at departmental spends in the comprehensive spending review that's happening later this year. But actually, what we've seen since the election in 2024 is growth in the economy. We've had no quarters of decline. And of course, we inherited a country with the highest tax burden since the 1960s under the Conservatives, after a parliament which saw the first falling independence in record history.
We have the highest taxes since World War II, and you made it World War III.
Well, we inherited the highest taxes since the 1960s from the previous Conservative government, £1.7 trillion worth of borrowing, a faster borrowing rate, by the way, from 2010 to 2024 than the previous Labour government before that. So clearly we have to make sure that the finances add up. But what I will say is look at the markets today. The markets take sentiment, they look at the overall picture of the finances in this country, and what we're seeing is the markets are not responding negatively to the change in premiership. We will wait to see who the Chancellor is, but I think fundamentally the direction of travel for the last 2 years has been growth in the economy. We could be doing more, absolutely, but we have not seen the two recessions that we had in the last Parliament.
OK, thank you very much for joining us on the show. That's the Labour Party MP for Chatham and Aylesford, Tris Osborne. Pleasure to have your company. Thank you very much indeed. Live pictures there of Downing Street we saw. That's where the action is going to be. We think in about 40 minutes' time, those cars will start coming down Downing Street. The ministers will start walking down Downing Street. The new cabinet, the new top table will be announced. They'll be pounced upon by our man Chris Hope and Tom Harwood as they get down there. But as we await with bated breath for the next chapter, the first chapter of Andy Burnham's premiership. Let's get some analysis now. Back in the studio here in Westminster, I'm delighted to be joined by the political correspondent at the New Statesman, Megan Kenyon. Megan, welcome to the studio. A pleasure to have you. New Statesman, of course, excellent publication. I subscribe. And you're from the political left, of course. What is the left making about this? Let's be honest, things couldn't get any worse than they were under Sir Keir Starmer. It was a disaster.
I think that, yeah, for sure, it reached a bit of a breaking point. And, I mean, to me, I found this slightly surreal, because I think if you'd have asked me at the start of this year, would Andy Burnham be the Prime Minister by the end of it, I would have said, well, there's a lot of hurdles for him to have to get over to get there. Obviously, he then was blocked in Gorton and Denton, went on to win the Makerfield by-election by a substantial margin, and now is the Prime Minister. So I think, for sure, it's been interesting to see Labour MPs kind of, many of whom were potentially going to support other people should there have been a leadership contest, rallying round Andy Burnham now, kind of jostling for positions, suggesting maybe they sort of know what he's thinking. I think actually he's kept his cards very, very close to his chest. We really don't know all that much about what he intends to do with the cabinet. We've heard a few things about Chancellor, etc. But yeah.
Electorally, it's going to be very, very interesting because, of course, Andy Burnham, his personal popularity is undeniably high. His personal rating, I think, is the highest amongst any political leader at the moment in quite some time. But when the policies start coming out, the devil will be in the detail. And who's going to put those out there is key. Shabana Mahmood has been talked about a lot as Chancellor. She isn't an economist, she's a lawyer, but she also fulfills a brief at the moment of Home Secretary. Let's face it, it's almost the poison chalice of any political party, but particularly for the Labour Party. The elephant in the room with Team Burnham since the beginning, he hasn't even mentioned immigration. He didn't mention immigration today at Downing Street. He didn't mention immigration in his speech in Manchester. He didn't mention it the other day when he first gave his announcement speech. If Shabana Mahmood goes to Chancellor, who's going to be the Home Secretary? Because if they don't get that right, they'd be doomed in the Red Wall.
Yeah, I think no one has kind of come forward as a sort of likely successor to Shabana Mahmood. I do think, though, that it's likely that her reforms will go forward in some form. Obviously, they have been controversial within the Parliamentary Labour Party. We've seen MPs like Tony Vaughan, who comes from the softer left of the party, sort of, providing quite a lot of opposition. Andy Burnham has said he is still supportive of those reforms, but I think that there will probably need to be some sort of tweaks, concessions. But yeah, it's a really, really tough brief. I think Shabana Mahmood was doing quite a good job of it in terms of getting stuff done. Maybe not potentially, it was politically controversial, some of what she was trying to do. But, you can't say she kind of wasn't going ahead and sort of delivering it. So it'll be interesting to see if she does become the Chancellor, what she'll be like in that role. Will she be as robust? It's potentially a more difficult one.
There was a backlash from Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting and others. They said that Shabana's plan to make the indefinite leave to remain period of time go from 5 years to 10 years, to double that. They call that un-British. So I think all eyes on who gets that brief, because if there is an immediate dilution of those clampdowns, I'm sure that would go down very badly. Chancellor, everybody's talking about tax. It's a left-leaning Labour government. People always think that equates to additional taxation. Shabana Mahmood, historically, in 2014, did say it was unfair and wrong to decrease the top rate of tax from 50p to 45p. That's when the Conservative Lib Dem coalition got in, and she said it'll be right for the next Labour government to raise it to 50p again. Well, she could be the Chancellor in about an hour's time. Could we see tax hikes on the agenda?
I'm not sure. I don't kind of want to make any predictions, but I think Shabana Mahmood, one thing that Labour MPs who are on the left of the party have said to me is that what really matters is that she's on board with Andy Burnham's programme. That will be what's really important. If Andy Burnham is serious about doing a radical change from Keir Starmer, he needs someone in number 11 who's fully supportive, fully gets his programme, because they're going to have to deliver very, very quickly. They're going to have to hit the ground running if they want to sort of make some radical change. OK, thank you for the moment, Megan. Interject now, got some very, very sad breaking news. One of the heroes of my childhood, Kevin Keegan, King Kev, has sadly died. The former England footballer and manager, of course, the manager of England in a hugely emotional period. They can see him a champion for Liverpool FC, European Cup winner, went on to Hamburg. He's died, aged just 75. Kevin Keegan has died. Look at him, what a magnificent player, what a magnificent role model he was. There's a public appearance not very long ago, actually, where Kevin Keegan told us that he was living with stage 5 cancer. Breaking news, very, very sad news. Former English footballer and manager Kevin Keegan has died at the age of 75. In a statement, his family said this:
It's with immense sadness that we announce that Kevin Keegan has passed away at the age of 75. The former England player and manager had been battling cancer and was surrounded by his wife and daughters in his final moments. Just to repeat there, very, very sad news. The legend, the absolute god of football, Kevin Keegan, sadly dies at the age of 75. Rest in peace, King Kev. Still to come, we're crossing to Manchester as their former mayor, Andy Burnham, has now become the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Uncontested. We'll be finding out in the next hour or so what residents there make of it. Plus, the Cabinet will be announced throughout this afternoon, live on Downing Street. We'll be there with a ring side seat for you. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News, Britain's #1 news channel.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray. Are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it. Don't get this on the BBC. Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos. What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there.
Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here at GB News, we made a promise to tell your stories. And on the 6th of August, we're marking 5 years of doing exactly that.
Celebrate with us by having your say. Join in the debates live on TV and radio.
And meeting your favourite presenters across the country, from Leeds to Aberdeen, from Belfast to Barry Island.
Plus, join me in Essex for our biggest live show of the year. Scan the QR code or visit gbnews.com/celebrate. Terms and conditions apply. As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
The Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:32. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, some breaking news for you now. Donald Trump, he's wasted no time whatsoever. He's spoken to our new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, in one of his first telephone calls since entering number 10. White House sources have confirmed. Now, it's worth remembering that our new Prime Minister wasn't even a member of Parliament until just over a month ago. And he's already spoken with Donald Trump. But let's now speak with our national reporter, Sophie Reaper, who is there for us in Manchester. Sophie, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. History has been made. An uncontested Prime Minister has waltzed into Downing Street. He's from the north. It's quite fitting. It's more like Coronation Street.
Well, Martin, you might say that, but Andy Burnham's actually from Liverpool, where, of course, Coronation Street is based in Manchester. Now, the interesting interesting part about today is, of course, it's the first day of Andy Burnham's premiership, but it's also, we understand, the first day of number 10 in the North. This promise from Andy Burnham to take power away from Westminster and spread it around the country, and he said the first part of doing that is creating this hub here in Manchester for civil servants, for members of the government to come here, and he himself has actually promised to spend at least one day a week here at number 10 in the North. Now, the actual location, it hasn't officially been confirmed for security reasons, but it's understood by members of the media that it's here at Heron House in Manchester city centre. And while we've been stood here this afternoon, we've seen the glass on the front replaced with reflective glass, and we also now have seen, since Andy Burnham has been appointed Prime Minister, we've seen several police officers stood outside. So I think we can take that as a pretty positive sign that this is going to be the temporary base for what is being called number 10 in the North. Now, in the future, we know that the permanent site will actually be about 2 miles down the road from this point, at what is currently a brownfield site in the Ancoats region of Manchester. Right now, it's just rubble which is being worked on, but in the future, it's proposed to be the Manchester Digital Campus, and as we understand it, that will be the permanent home for number 10 in the North. But right now, on day one of Andy Burnham's premiership, we understand that number 10 in the North is currently being based, for a temporary time at least, here at Heron House in Manchester city centre.
Thank you very much there, Sophie Reaper, the new epicentre of political power, Manchester. Thank you for joining us. We'll come back to you throughout the rest of the show. Now, still to come, we're crossing back to Downing Street, of course, for more reaction as Andy Burnham has become Prime Minister, and the cabinet reshuffle is expected any minute now down that world-famous street. We will see Andy Burnham's top team being announced as the reshuffle breaks through. Our man Chris Hope will be there like a news terrier, grabbing them as they come through. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
Afternoon. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The largely dry weather continues for most of this week. Maybe some signs of a bit of a change as we head towards the weekend. But generally, high pressure sitting just to the west of us, blocking weather systems from coming in from the Atlantic. Around the high pressure, the breeze is generally drifting in from the north. That will generate a bit more cloud through the North Sea and at times onto the east coast, and certainly staying fairly cloudy over northern Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland, where, well, that cloud thick enough for a little bit of light rain and drizzle at times. But for the vast majority, it's a dry night. Many western areas staying clear. A coolish, comfortable night, really. Temperatures dipping down into the low teens for most of us. To start Tuesday, I think we'll have quite a bit of cloud across the east, and the cloud's still thick across northern Scotland. So a bit of a damp start maybe for Orkney, across the Outer Hebrides and across northern portions of the mainland. Quite a bit of cloud here, but for central Scotland, southern Scotland, a fair bit of sunshine. Generally a cloudy start too for Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England, and maybe just one or two light showers affecting the coast of Suffolk, Norfolk and perhaps Kent, but not amounting to very much. And most places will stay dry. Still some of that drizzly rain, though, feeding into the highlands of Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland. I suspect southern parts of Northern Ireland may well see some bright spells developing, and elsewhere many areas seeing some sunshine, and in that sunshine across the south, 25, 26, maybe 27, 28 in one or two places. So again, a pretty warm day, just not as hot as much of the summer has been. A bit more cloud over northeast England, may generate one or two showers during the course of tomorrow evening. We'll continue with thicker cloud over Caithness, Sutherland, the odd little bit of rain. Many places staying dry with sunny spells through the rest of this week, but there are signs of something a little wetter as we head towards the weekend.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News each and every week.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A38 is closed after the A384 in Devon. The A36 is closed after the A303 near Wiley. The A5 is closed after the A453. The A428 is closed after the A1 near St Neots. In Scotland, the M90 northbound has lane restrictions near junction 1A at Queensferry, causing queues. Across Wales, the M4 westbound from J24 Coldra to J26 Malpass is congested with possible delays. And on the trains, there is major disruption on Grand Central and Great Northern services between London King's Cross and Stevenage. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 3:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, any moment now, we're expecting the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, to unveil his first cabinet, who he said will deliver the biggest change in British politics for over 40 years. But let's now speak with our political editor, Chris Hope from Downing Street. Chris, you got some breaking news for you on who's going out of those revolving doors.
Yeah, we have the first sacking of Andy Burnham's government. Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary, Local Government Secretary, he has resigned. Now, he says in a letter to Andy Burnham released moments ago that he's sad to be leaving the government, disappointed to be leaving the government. He wishes his team every success. It's a long letter which talks about his achievements in government. He finishes up, though, saying Labour governments do not come often. They face pressures and hostilities that their counterparts never do. But they are the best single vehicle we have for improving the lives of working people. If they fail, it's not politicians who suffer, it's those who need us the most. I will do everything in my power to ensure you succeed. So there you have it. The first, well, he said he's resigning. I mean, I would say he's been forced out of government because he says he's disappointed not to be carrying on in his role. Now, we expect to be filling his role Lisa Nandy, the Wigan MP, neighbouring MP, of course, to where Andy Burnham is in Makerfield, someone who knows the local government's area very well. She'll be taking over the housing brief and also a super ministry, including the devolved nations, devolved regions in England too. So that's her new role. We expect then Lisa Nandy to be replacing Steve Reed. This reshuffle will get underway in earnest from around 5 to 4. We're expecting cabinet ministers coming up the street from then, Martin. So do please stay with me and we'll go back to them. And as you said earlier, the PM, Andy Burnham, has also made important phone calls to allies. We think President Zelensky of Ukraine has had a phone call, and also we're now hearing from the United States that Donald Trump has phoned Andy Burnham.
Chris Hope, superb there from Downing Street. The first casualty of war, Steve Reed, is gone as Housing Secretary. Thank you, Chris. We're coming back to you for more reaction throughout the rest of the show. Let's get back to my studio guest. Delighted to be joined today in Westminster by the political correspondent at the New Statesman, Megan Kenyon. Megan, we weren't at all surprised by the fact Steve Reed has resigned. One of the most pro-Starmer lawyers you'll ever find. The writing was always on the wall.
Yeah, I think Steve Reed probably was never going to be kept on in an Andy Burnham cabinet, as you said, really pro-Keir Starmer. Used to work with Morgan McSweeney, who was Keir Starmer's chief of staff when he was the leader of Lambeth Council. So, you know, he's one of those ministers who I think went out onto Downing Street to defend Keir Starmer when kind of all of the speculation about his position was going on. So, for sure, I don't think it's that surprising that he is one of the first to go.
Steve Reed, of course, rose to prominence on the tide of Starmerism. No surprise he's sinking sharpish with Andy Burnham coming in. Lisa Nandy, of course, presently Departments of Culture, Media and Sport, being touted there as a replacement for housing. You said that she has form in this. You think she'd be a good candidate? I think, well, she has... She was the shadow Levelling Up Secretary, as it was, when Michael Gove was in the role, before Angela Rayner was moved into that position. So she kind of oversaw a lot of Labour's devolution programme in opposition. So she's got experience there. She's dealt with local government. She's obviously a Northern MP, Wigan, next door to Andy Burnham, you know, an ally of his. And this would be delivering one of his key agendas, right? Devolution. He's talked about that a lot throughout the Makerfield by-election and throughout his kind of run-up to becoming Prime Minister. OK, so that could be part of Andy Burnham's first northern powerhouse. I do hope Lisa Nandy's council tax is up to date. Wouldn't it be embarrassing if it wasn't like Angela Rayner? Where might Angela Rayner feature in this cabinet? Rumours of a comeback, potentially even as health. That's right. Angela Rayner, the cigarette-smoking, pint-swigging former deputy leader. Where will she feature in this cabinet? Here's another huge question. Who will be the next Home Secretary? And might they water down immigration targets? Let's now speak with the Deputy Online Editor at The Critic, Tom Jones. Tom Jones, all the rumours are Shabana Mahmood will be whisked into the Chancellor of the Exchequer's seat, leaving a big pair of shoes to fill. Now, a lot of people think that she wasn't that successful anyway, but she talked a great game. Are you concerned, Tom Jones, that the new minister might water those plans down?
Well, frankly, I think you have to be. Shabana Mahmood, as you say, was always portrayed as being very much on the right of the Labour Party. Actually, I think it's fair to say she was probably tougher on migration than most of the Conservative Home Secretaries of the last 14 years. Obviously, there's Burnham's plans so far have been relatively woolly around what he's actually going to do on migration. And I think it's a really big worry that basically this is a very totemic issue for the Labour benches, that it would be very, very easy for him to give ground on. And already today we can see David Lammy, despite the changes that are at the top that are coming today, still digging in his heels about trying to basically pull the wool over the British public's eyes around criminal statistics on basically how many migrants are committing crimes in this country.
Yeah, we're going to cover that story in more detail later on. It's being touted as a foreign criminal cover-up. Of course, the Centre for Migration Control have got some information out of the government previously. The government don't like it because it tends to shatter the multicultural dream. It proved 22 times more likely to be a sex offender if you are Afghani as opposed to Brits. We'll come to that later on in the show. Do you think, Tom Jones, there's an impossible balancing act here for the Labour Party on immigration, pretty much the same there was for the Conservatives on Brexit? On the one hand, if they go soft, the red wall MPs will be furious. On the other hand, if they clamp down, then the green-leaning seats, which Labour are losing in city centres, will be furious. You've got one half of the party wants to clamp down, one half of the party wants to water it down.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's absolutely true. And you can see the evidence of that in the fact that Keir Starmer's whole migration stick was to smash the gangs. And that fundamentally was a workaround that tried to characterise this problem as the result of organised crime, and that being the driving factor rather than the kind of overly generous settlement that we have for migrants here. Obviously, Shabana Mahmood moved considerably away from that, particularly on legal migration, and you could already see the backlash coming. I think there was a rebellion led, of course, by Angela Rayner, where it was almost 90 MPs signed that letter in opposition to her reforms on ILR. And I think ultimately a lot of the plans that Andy Burnham has for government and whatever Manchesterism is, we'll soon find out, are going to be contingent on bringing reforms around ILR that don't make those dreams financially impossible.
Tom Jones, superb. Thank you for joining us on the show today. I appreciate your time. Very quickly before the break, Megan Kenyon, could I get your take on this almost impossible tightrope act the Labour Party is having to play now on immigration?
Yeah, I think obviously, there's been quite a lot of pushback on some of Shabana Mahmood's reforms. I do think that actually we might see some concessions, but I'm not sure we'll see complete watering down, because I think there is an understanding that they have got to do something on this and in order to kind of push back on reform. OK, superb. Thank you very much, Megan. Now, coming up next, we'll return to the breaking news. Andy Burnham has become Prime Minister, but what does that mean for Britain, and who will the Cabinet be? We'll be there on Downing Street as the news breaks. First, though, is the forecast for some of your top European destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Heading to the Mediterranean, well, prepare yourselves for some quite extreme heat at the moment. So some strong sunshine for many areas and potentially 1 or 2 thunderstorms, mainly for the Balkans, especially Bosnia, Croatia, up across parts of Slovenia and Austria over the next few days, mainly in the afternoons, affecting the Alps and northern parts of Italy too. Some really high temperatures across Iberia, the mid-40s perhaps for inland parts of Spain and also Portugal. But really, as we go through the next few days, the sunny and very hot weather continues.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
What do you think about where we're going to get our future athletes and our Olympians from when we're telling our children, oh, you can't go out and partake in sports today because it's a bit hot?
It really worries me. We have a generation that spend their life being very inactive, an awful lot of time on mobile telephones, coming up with every excuse as to not to move and not to be moving. Sport in schools is where we can catch every kid. And the kids that will lose out are the kids that come from areas of deprivation, because the parents that can afford to make sure their children do sport will still do that. But the parents that can't afford, sadly, will miss out. So it's really important that our kids, do enough physical activity, lay down these habits, understand about how their body works and nutrition and food and looking after themselves and health. We have a health crisis. It's really important we start early.
The People's Channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News entertainment editor Alex Davies joins us now. What a woman, what a voice, what an incredible life. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, like you said, she's a singer whose songs have transcended generations, really. Everybody knows Total Eclipse of the Heart. Everybody knows Holding Out for a Hero. She's been awarded an MBE. She represented the UK at Eurovision. And it's just very sad. Tributes have already started to pour in from across the showbiz world and just fans in general, This is somebody who's, like I said, transcended generations with her music and will continue to do so posthumously.
Well,
so much. I met her just once in a green room. She was an absolute delight, and even speaking, she had that great rasping voice.
Oh, what an incredible voice.
Incredible voice.
GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So you go along to the car showroom and only like 10%, at most maybe 15%, pay cash. The rest buy it on some form of financing. And you often buy, it's a bit like a mortgage, and it's like buying a mortgage from the estate agent, which we all know is a terribly bad idea. But this is what people did. And the scandal is, the guys in the showroom were acting as dealers and brokers, and they were in many cases inflating the interest rate that you paid so that they could get bigger commission. And they didn't declare that. So you basically ended up paying more for your car than you would otherwise have done if you'd gone into the open market and found yourself, a better deal.
How did that come to light?
Well, over many years. I mean, this has been going on since 2007.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the show. Andy Burnham has been crowned now the Prime Minister this morning as he vowed to make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain. Well, later in the show, we're expecting the new Prime Minister to unveil his first cabinet, his top table, who he said will deliver the biggest change in British politics for 40 years. But remember, they were the same people that were in Sir Keir Starmer's government. But let's get back to the studio for some analysis before the end of this hour. I'm delighted to be joined by the political correspondent at the New Statesman, Megan Kenyon. Megan, you and I were struck by the first pledge that Andy Burnham made as Prime Minister today at Downing Street to end rough sleeping. Now, I know, and you know, because you've done some analysis in the New Statesman, it's not the first time Andy Burnham has promised this, and before, he completely failed.
Yes, so when Andy Burnham was elected the Mayor of Greater Manchester in 2017, he made a similar pledge. He said he wanted to end rough sleeping in Greater Manchester by 2020. Now, he got quite close to really reducing the numbers. I think it went from 268 in 2017 to 89 in 2021. Yeah. But then since, in those 4 years since, it's ticked up again. So I think by 2025 it was back up to 197. Yes. So I just found it really interesting that Andy Burnham had pledged to do something that he has tried and failed to do before. I guess it just shows the ambition that he's trying to bring, but also that this is an issue that is very core to his philosophy, core to what he wants to do.
I wonder if it shows something else, and that is, who can disagree? Who can disagree with the notion that ending homelessness is a bad idea? Of course, it's a great thing, but is it attainable? Is it achievable? And how might it be attained? Where will these homes come from? We simply don't know. Let's go back to Down Street now. Our man Chris Hope's got some breaking news. Chris, what you got for us?
Breaking news is David Lammy has left the government, Martin Daubney, the Deputy Prime Minister to Sir Keir Starmer. He's tweeted in the past 2 minutes he is resigning from this Labour government. He won't be going forward with Andy Burnham in his new group. He says this in summary: I've been proud to continue serving in Cabinet, but a new Prime Minister is entitled to build his own team, and I wish Andy Burnham and the new Cabinet every success. I'll continue to serve the great people of Tottenham, he says, support this Labour government from the backbenches and do everything I can to defeat reform again at the next general election. To confirm, David Lammy follows Steve Reid out the front door of this government. That means that the Andy Burnham behind the scenes is making these difficult phone calls. We now think that the appointments won't start until 4:45, so delayed slightly. Often these phone calls can take longer than expected, and also if you're trying to slot new people in, if people don't want to move, that delays the whole thing. So around 4:45 now for the appointments. As things stand, David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister and of course the Justice Secretary, facing a form of a difficult September when they start releasing more prisoners early before their term is up. He is leaving the government. That job is open, and so of course is the housing, local government, and probably a souped up devolution role in government. So those two big figures, big faces of the Keir Starmer government, they're off.
Chris Hope, that's an immense announcement there. The revolving door on the way out. Steve Reid, housing, he's gone. Silence of the Lammy. Finally, people might say, hallelujah, David Lammy has left the government. Of course, he's former Justice, Foreign Secretary, Deputy Prime Minister. They are on their way out. Wow. Thank you very much, Chris Hope. We'll come back to you for breaking news as it happens. Thank you very much indeed. Quick bit of analysis back here in the studio. Of course, I'm joined by Megan Kenyon from The New Statesman. Megan, you didn't seem very surprised at that. Again, another Starmer loyalist bites the bullet.
No, I wasn't particularly surprised that David Lammy has gone, obviously Deputy Prime Minister. You know, some of his jury trial reforms at the moment have been quite controversial. And I think, you know, very close to Keir Starmer, someone that probably just felt too close to the Starmer administration. You know, I think Andy Burnham will want to have quite a clean break, want to show that he's doing something new. So, yeah, I wasn't surprised.
And we heard a lot of rumours that Andy Burnham was going to reverse that jury trials manoeuvre anyway, and that'd be a huge embarrassment for David Lammy. It was one of his flagship proposals. It went down like a cup of cold sick, left, right and centre. Nevertheless, it was his big idea. Now he's gone.
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's all to play for now. We don't know who the next Justice Secretary will be. If they do drop those reforms or at least do some concessions on that, that might prevent a rebellion on the Labour backbenches. I know that there was a lot of opposition kind of building. So, yeah, it's still all to play for.
It certainly is. Just to repeat the news we know so far today before we end this hour. 2 resignations dramatically in the last few moments. David Lammy, of course, former Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, also had been a Foreign Secretary. It's been the greatest privilege of my life, coming from humble beginnings in Tottenham, to serve this government. Steve Reid out as the Housing Secretary, rumoured to be replaced by Lisa Nandy. Don't go anywhere. The full Cabinet should be announced this afternoon on Downing Street. We'll be live there for you with a ring-size seat for political history. Thank you very much, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News every week.
You're not only watching and listening to our programmes, you're becoming part of them too.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A38 is closed after the A384 in Buckfastleigh. The A36 is closed after the A303 in Wiley. The A5 is closed after the A453. In Scotland, the A720 westbound has lane restrictions between the A7 Sheriff Hall roundabout and the A68 Millerhill junction, with queues reported. Across Wales, the M4 westbound from J24 Coldra to J26 Malpas is congested with possible delays. And on the trains, there is major disruption on Grand Central and Great Northern services between London King's Cross and Stevenage. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
We're celebrating a golden summer with your chance to win a real gold bar. That's right, a fine gold bullion bar worth over £5,000 could be yours. We're also going to make sure your finances are fabulous with £60,000 in tax-free cash. For a chance to win, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's all kicking off on Downing Street. We've got a ringside seat for you for the next 2 hours. Welcome to the show. It's 4 p.m. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting for you until 6 p.m. A cracking show awaits today.
Bring forward a new plan for Britain. Let us make this the moment when Britain starts to believe again. The moment we bring back hope. Thank you very much, everybody.
Today was sworn in as the UK's 59th Prime Minister and our 4th in under 4 years. He pledged to make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain and added, "I'll make politics work better." But will this northern takeover of turning Downing Street into Coronation Street have a happy ending, or will it be just another political soap opera? Now, during today's show, Andy Burnham will announce his cabinet. In fact, he has already sacked the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, the Housing Secretary, Steve Reed, and we've just learned in these past few moments, Rachel Reeves is history. Rachel Reeves is no longer the Chancellor of the Exchequer. With the new Chancellor, might Britain be thrown back to 1970s-style taxation? Might a new Home Secretary water down immigration clampdowns? And can a new Prime Minister chart a new course for Britain? Or is Andy Burnham merely rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? We'll have full analysis throughout the show from the best in the business. Chopper, over to you.
That's right, Martin. In the past few seconds, Rachel Reeves quits the government. Steve Reed, he's gone from housing. David Lammy from justice, also the Deputy Prime Minister. Space is opening up now for Andy Burnham to appoint his own team to his top team. And also in the past few moments we can reveal that Andy Burnham has spoken for the first time to journalists. He said he's looking now at lifting the threshold of income tax to stop people paying that because it's frozen, and maybe hints at maybe even a 50p top rate of tax. It's all changing here in Westminster.
A night of the long knives, or perhaps an afternoon of the long knives for those closest to Keir Starmer. But will this purge of the Labour centrists mean that Andy Burnham fails to live up to his promise to have a cabinet that represents all traditions within the Labour Party?
Well, we're hearing, following a conversation between Andy Burnham and Donald Trump, it could be that the President of the United States is going to come here to Manchester. Meanwhile, on the first day of Andy Burnham's premiership, number 10 in the North is open for business.
Magnificence of Sophie, Tom and Chris. Let's get back now to Chris Hope, our political editor, down there for us on Downing Street, turning into a nightmare on Downing Street for the Starmer loyalists. Chris Hope, we've already seen the back of Steve Reid, of David Lammy, and in this past few moments we've learned Rachel Reeves has walked out of the door.
Yes, now that is surprising because it's reported elsewhere that Rachel Reeves has turned down a big role in government. Now, what I think that could be, I haven't had it confirmed from Rachel Reeves' team. I think she may have been offered the Defence Secretary's job. That was certainly in the air yesterday when I was reporting for GB News, but she has decided not to accept any further role in government. She says this: "It's been a privilege of my life to serve as a Chancellor of the Exchequer. The economy," she said, "is stronger, fairer and more resilient." She says she's restored stability, investment delivered, and reform to our economy is underway. She says she wishes the very best of luck to her successor, Andy, and his cabinet. "You have my full support," says Rachel Reeves, "and I will continue to play my part in helping this Labour government deliver the change the country needs." But she will not be part of Andy Burnham's government going forward. Also out the door is David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, and also Steve Reid, the Housing Secretary. So big jobs are opening up in government. Right now, I think it's going to be Shabana Mahmood following Rachel Reeves into number 11 Downing Street. I'm not sure who's going to be replacing David Lammy in Justice. We think that Lisa Nandy is taking on a super ministry, including housing, local government and the devolved parts of England in her department. Also, in the past few moments, we can reveal details of a conversation we had earlier as journalists with Prime Minister Andy Burnham just over this building here in the garden of 10 Downing Street. In that interview with reporters, he told us that he heard loud and clear in Makerfield widespread concern about the personal income tax allowance. Now, that's the allowance at which we all start paying income tax. It's been frozen at £12,570 since 2021, and it's frozen until 2031 at that level. And that means that many people are being pulled into paying income tax, even on the state pension and other people on low incomes. The Prime Minister Andy Burnham said he heard issues related to the personal allowance more than anything else in the doorsteps in Makerfield. It's been frozen now for a number of years. It's dragged more people in, pensioners, I think, and that particularly has become a growing issue. He also alluded to maybe, or didn't rule out, bringing in a top rate of tax, a 50p tax for those on the highest incomes. That was axed, of course, by the Tory government back in 2013. On that, to ask directly on the issue of 50p tax, Andy Burnham said this to reporters: "I think that would be just premature to say that. I barely got my feet under the table." So already focus on taxation. If he goes ahead and unfreezes the level at which we start paying income tax if you're working from £12,570, that will ease the pressure on hundreds of thousands of people on low incomes. But how do you pay for it? Will he bring in a top rate of tax, 50p for those on highest earnings? We'll wait and see. So much happening here. So to recap, movement on tax from the Prime Minister Andy Burnham, briefing me and other reporters in Number 10's garden an hour or so ago, and major moves in the cabinet. Rachel Reeves out, Steve Reid out, David Lammy out. We should be getting people walking up the street into Downing Street. Those appointments start probably around 4:45 now.
Chris Hope, it's already turning into Burnham's bloodbath there on Downing Street. A nightmare on Downing Street for Steve Reid, for David Lammy, for Rachel Reeves. Chris, let's go back to the taxation issue. Tony Blair made his government education, education, education. A lot of people are saying already a Burnham regime could be taxation, taxation, taxation. Chris, if Burnham starts meddling with tax rates, particularly jacking up the top rate of tax to 50p, then the Labour Party have no mandate for that. He has no mandate for that. He's tearing up Keir Starmer's manifesto promises not to touch the big three taxes. Chris, I put it to you, if that's the case, it's time for a general election.
And that's the problem he's got, Martin, because if you do mess with the top rates of tax, That is breaking a manifesto commitment not to increase income tax, VAT or national insurance. Now, the last government under Rachel Reeves, she increased employers' share of national insurance and froze those thresholds for longer to bring in more money. But he is seeing, in the people of Makerfield, people on lower incomes, many people maybe who watch GB News and listen to GB News, that threshold being frozen is making more of them pay income tax when they weren't expecting to. As I say before, it's been frozen at £12,570 since 2021. It's frozen for a decade until 2031. That is a priority for him. We're going to hear more tomorrow from the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, about cost of living measures. It could almost be called a mini budget. But guess what, Martin? Here's the kicker. Parliament isn't sitting. MPs aren't over the road. He can't surely announce any kind of tax and spend or major spending measures when Parliament isn't sitting for another 41 days.
But Chris, he said earlier on, don't worry, I'll give you basically a bit of breathing space tomorrow, hinting at a giveaway. A lot of people saying that's going to be on potentially on energy bills. But Chris Hope, the biscuit tin is empty. Once again, the government is potless. Now, we have a £3 trillion national debt and rising. The Labour Party can say, Keir Starmer can say all he likes. He's left the country in a better state than he found it, but he hasn't in terms of national debt. Public sector spending is going through the roof. And people will be saying, you know, this all sounds great. How's it going to be paid for?
And that is the problem we're hearing. Now, there are reports now breaking this moments ago that Peter Kyle has also left the government. Of course, he was the tech secretary and latterly the business secretary. That would free up that space for Jonathan Reynolds, who currently is the chief whip. He was inexplicably, according to his supporters, moved from being business secretary to becoming chief whip in that reshuffle in September last year by Prime Minister then Sir Keir Starmer. He could be back at the business department. We think Peter Kyle may have left the government. We're trying to get that confirmed now as we speak. But yes, the biscuit tin is certainly empty, and how this government raises money is the next question. The problem is it goes back to the first base, I think, in a sense that the last Tory government spent £500 billion it wasn't meant to be spending on the COVID pandemic and dealing with the energy shock from Ukraine's invasion by Russia, and put all of that on the overdraft, supported by Labour. Until any government is willing to admit that was a problem and probably adjust tax rates accordingly, we're going to still be a problem where there's nowhere to go with how they raise money. Can they borrow more money? What will the bond markets think? But as I say, within the past next hour or so, we're going to see probably a new Chancellor appointed, probably Shabana Mahmood. But the timescale is slipping through the day, and that's because I think some people who were meant to be moved aren't going. As I said before, I'd heard yesterday on good authority Rachel Reeves will be offered the job of Defence Secretary. I'm hearing elsewhere on Fleet Street that she's turned down a major job in government. I wonder if that was the Defence Secretary role, and therefore I wonder whether the team behind us in Number 10 Downing Street are trying to slot new people into new jobs, and that's when it becomes a game of 3D chess, trying to manoeuvre pieces into place to form the next government.
I wonder, Chris, if Rachel Reeves just thought, you know what, sod this for a game of soldiers. You know, as Chancellor, she was, I think, cruelly exposed. A lot of people felt she was out of her depth. Don't forget, she was crying at PMQ. She's looked close to tears quite often on that front bench, looking increasingly forlorn. Perhaps she just realised politics at that level isn't for her, and perhaps who can blame her? But let's look so far. It's a Burnham bloodbath of the Starmer loyalists. Everybody who's been the most loyal to Keir Starmer is getting the chop as we speak. Chris Hope.
Well, it really is. When I was outside Number 10 around 11 o'clock, I looked along all those cabinet ministers who came out to cheer out Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. There was Rachel Reeves. There was Steve Reid. I didn't see Peter Kyle. I did see David Lammy. They've all gone for the chop. There was no one in the street welcoming Andy Burnham, I could see, apart from Rosie Winterson, who now sits in the House of Lords, and Peter Reid, of course, the former Everton player and England player, but no one else. That's why it's quite a mystery on who he's choosing to appoint. But, of course, as I was trying to say earlier, if people don't want to move, that creates problems in this reshuffle he will have planned for the past few days. As I say, reports are that Rachel Reeves turned turned down a role elsewhere. I wonder if that was the role in defence, and that's caused a bit of a headache in reshaping his top team. But we'll wait and see. As I say, up from the gates of number 10, we should be seeing people walking or arriving by car from around 4:45 now, so not long to wait.
Reid, of course, the former Everton and England player. Of course, Andy Burnham, a huge Everton fan, but Peter Reid, as sports minister, talk about bend it like Beckham, bend it like Burnham. That'd be a curveball nobody saw coming. I'm only joshing, of course, Chris Hope. But Chris, the bloodletting is beginning thick and fast now. You got some more for me?
Yeah, well, I've got you some more breaking news from the conversation that the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, had with reporters about 2 hours ago, breaking at 4 o'clock. Andy Burnham is considering possibly introducing rent controls in a cost of living package, it is reported. There'll be major announcements announced tomorrow about the economy, including about how he'll pay for measures he's going to introduce. Some of those will be making a difference, we are told, and they could include rent controls. So that'll be difficult for landlords, but relief, I think, for renters who have seen rents go sky high in recent years.
Chris Hope, rent controls, beloved of the political left, brought in by the Mayor of New York. They don't work. They haven't worked in New York so long as it's a supply and demand issue, and you can't control the supply by uncontrolled immigration. I'm afraid that then this is going to be a huge problem. There's been a lot of talk in the past, Chris Hope, of left-wing parliamentarians seizing private assets. Chris, you got more for me?
Yeah, I can now confirm Rachel Reeves was offered a big job in government, but declined. No further details beyond that. As I say, I was told yesterday she'll be offered the Defence Secretary role. That role, of course, is somewhat in a department which has wasted money by the billions in recent years. Bringing in Rachel Reeves could be an acceptable way to move her from Chancellorship into defence, because of the £5 billion defence black hole, in the Defence Investment Plan. We can confirm she was offered a big job but declined to take it, and that may be what's held up the cabinet reshuffle. As I say, it was meant to be underway at 4 o'clock. That hasn't happened. I think it's probably because, I'm guessing now, it was defence, but she was offered a big job. As I said yesterday, she was offered a big role in defence. She unveiled the Defence Investment Plan. She briefed journalists at NATO and Ankara about the defence plan. It may have been a clever way of giving her a job she may want to do and to rehabilitate her own reputation. I should also, while I'm with you, Martin, if you can bear with me, Andy Burnham reportedly used his first phone call with Donald Trump to invite him to Manchester. So Burnham has invited Donald Trump to Manchester. Donald Trump said in reports that he would like to take him up on the offer. That's according to officials with knowledge of the phone call, according to the Politico website. That'll be the first visit by Donald Trump, we think, to Northern England. He tends to go to Scotland. I was with him in Turnberry last August. He has described, we understand that Donald Trump has described him, Andy Burnham, as extremely liberal and had heard him as mayor of a town. But there we have it. Andy Burnham invites Donald Trump to Manchester. It's all happening, Martin.
Who'd have thought it? When Manchester became the rave capital of the world, when I was there as a student, they called it Madchester. Would it be Magchester? Now the President of the United States is going over there. Make America Great, Chester. It's all happening there down on Downing Street. Let's bring in GB News' Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, who is with the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride. Tom, as we wait announcement for who's going to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer, what's Mel Stride telling you?
Well, let's find out, Martin. Yes, I am here with the Shadow Chancellor, because Mel Stride, you have stood across the dispatch box from Rachel Reeves for the past 2 years. Will a part of you miss her leaving Cabinet?
Well, I think on the positive side, she was Chancellor. She held one of the great offices of state. She was the first female to hold that position. And off court, we got on pretty well. But I'm afraid her record in office has been pretty abysmal. She's left the economy in a very perilous state. She's overtaxed, she's overborrowed, she's overspent. We've seen unemployment rocketing up to a 5-year high, particularly bad for young people. So I'm afraid the record has not been good.
Of course, Rachel Reeves did try to do some things in government that you agreed with. She tried to save billions, £5 billion, off the welfare bill, but at the end of the day, it was backbench Labour MPs that prevented her from pursuing Plan A. Might it be that actually Rachel Reeves was the most sort of economically centrist Chancellor choice that the last Labour government had, and anyone else might well be a bit more left-wing?
Well, in terms of what needs to be done now, getting the welfare bill down is absolutely critical, and we have shown how we can make £25 billion worth of savings through getting people off benefits and into work. You are right, though. Labour have tried a bit of that, nothing like the scale of what we're proposing, failed to do it because of their backbenchers. Now, that's something that's not going to change. So, irrespective of who steps into Rachel Reeves' shoes, I'm afraid those fundamentals are not going to alter, along with the fact that what Andy Burnham seems to be suggesting now is more spending, more taxing, more borrowing, doubling down on the kind of mistakes that the Starmer government made.
There are rumours, of course, that the top rate of tax could raise up back to 50p in the pound. Speculation today that rent controls could be introduced by this government. Do you think this is a bit back to the 1970s?
Well, this seems to be what Andy Burnham seems to be hankering for. When he talks about the Labour Party he believes in, he excludes the Blair years and the Brown years. He is looking back to about the 1970s, and that was a disastrous period for our government. And it led, amongst other things, to the winter of discontent, terrible industrial relations, very high levels of inflation, and of course it took Margaret Thatcher to come in and finally sort all of that out back in the day. On rent controls, this would be a disastrous policy, because what this would do is actually restrict supply into the rental market. It would make it less advantageous to build new units. It would mean that landlords would have no incentive to keep up the quality of those units if they're getting less than the market rate for them. This would be a typical socialist, interventionist, ill-thought-through policy that I'm afraid would deliver precisely the opposite of the intention here. And this is what we've seen in big cities like New York since the Second World War. We've had some form of price control on rentals for many, many years. It simply does not work.
Pretty strong words there, yet it is, of course, policies like raising the top rate of tax, like fixing rents as well, that might poll well, even if the majority of economists might have a different view to the majority of the public. Are you concerned that you're going to be up against a much more populist Prime Minister?
What we're looking at here is a lot of speculation, and we're engaged in it now as to what he might do. What we don't have is a plan. In fact, what Andy Burnham said on the steps of Downing Street this morning was we'd have to wait until later on this year for him to come forward with his plan. What we say as a Conservative Party is that he should be recalling Parliament, he should be standing up at the dispatch box, explaining to Parliament, and so the British people, exactly what his plan is. And there's something else he must do, and that is to rule out any further tax increases. Because if he doesn't do that, we run the danger of going into this summer, just as we did last summer in the run-up to the last budget, with everybody speculating, just as you have there, Tom, about what taxes might go up. That breeds uncertainty and slows down the economy. And it's not just me saying that, it's the Office of Budget Responsibility and others that pointed to that as one of the problems with that particular approach. So he must come forward with his plan as soon as possible. And at the moment, we're not seeing it.
Do you believe that he has a plan, though? We're not seeing it as things stand, but on Friday, when Andy Burnham took on the Labour leadership, he, in his wide-ranging speech to the party faithful, declared he did have a plan. Was he lying?
If he's got a plan, then why is he not coming forward with it right now? If he's got a plan that's a good plan, and let's face it, he's had about a year of plotting his way to number 10 Downing Street, so you assume he's had time to put one together. If he's got that plan, he should come out with it and put an end to the kind of speculation that we're already engaging in, and it's only the afternoon of the morning of him becoming Prime Minister.
Now, speaking of speculation, we were expecting by this time to know who your new opposite number would be. Lots of speculation about would it be Ed Miliband, seems less likely now, would it be Shabana Mahmood, perhaps more likely. But it does seem that behind the scenes this reshuffle has hit some buffers, that things are running a little bit later than we expected. Do you think you will end the day facing Shabana Mahmood?
I have absolutely no idea. What I do know is I don't think it'll make a lot of difference as to who he selects. And I say that for two reasons. One is, and you've alluded to this, the backbench Labour Party in Parliament do not have the backbone to take the kind of tough decisions required in order to get on top of spending, particularly welfare. I don't think that is going to change. And the second thing is the general sense of direction that Andy Burnham is setting out, which is a much bigger state. You know, we're getting to the point where the rider is just too large for the horse. That is his kind of politics, doubling down on the kind of mistakes that Rachel Reeves made.
Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Tom Howard there with Mel Stride. Let's get back to our political editor, Chris Hope from Downing Street. Chris, there's yet more breaking news as the Burnham bloodbath continues.
Hermer out. Lord Hermer has quit the government. The Attorney General, many would see, was behind that hated Chagos deal by the right of politics. I interviewed him about 3 hours ago in the street here. He has resigned from the government. He says this: "It's been the privilege of my life to serve my country as Attorney General over the past 2 years. I've been so lucky to be part of Keir's team as he delivered for the public at home while rebuilding the UK's reputation abroad, in particular on the rule of law." Lord Hermer is out. Let's go recap on who's gone. It is, frankly, a clear out of the Starmerites. Steve Reid, Housing Secretary, gone. David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary, gone. Rachel Reeves, Chancellor, offered a big job in government, I believe, to be the Defence Secretary, not confirmed by her team. She has gone. And now Lord Hermer, he has gone, the Attorney General. An absolute clear-out, a bloodbath on Downing Street of people loyal to Keir Starmer. Who will replace them? We are yet to see any new appointments. The timetable is slipping, I expect, because Rachel Reeves may not have gone to the job they were expecting she would take, and that has meant they're reshuffling their plans here.
Well, Chris O, we're expecting the revolving door. So far, all we've seen is the trapdoor. The trapdoor opening and the Starmerites falling through one by one.
Well, on that, Martin, this is to be expected. What always happens is they have to move people aside to make the space for the appointment. So it's quite normal to have these resignations, sackings, whatever you call them, in the run-up to what happens next, which is the appointment. So this is always the way it is. It is particularly brutal, I think, to see faces so attuned, so closely allied to Keir Starmer losing their jobs. Just to recap there, Rachel Reeves, Steve Reid, David Lammy, and now Lord Hermer all gone. And we understand Peter Kyle, the Business Secretary, although I haven't got that confirmed myself yet.
Yeah, that's right. Reid, Lammy, Reeves, Kyle, now Hermer, all Starmer loyalists, all now political history. Chris, I want to rewind slightly about rent controls. People are talking about rent controls. This is the Green Party policy. The Mayor of New York made it very popular with young people. Who wouldn't want cheaper rent? But Chris, it's a proper left-wing policy. It generally involves the state meddling in the private market. It generally involves left-wing government seizing property. Chris, this is hardcore socialism.
Well, it certainly means the market isn't working as freely as it might. Some would say, though, that limited housing supply means rents are more expensive. Landlords then can charge more for rents, but if mortgages go up, the problem is if you start messing with the market in that way, it can have counterpoint issues which you weren't expecting, and that may be what happens. Yes, some would say in New York it hasn't worked very well there. As I say, the reports to say that he is looking also at rent controls. It will be a defiantly Labour government. He said that to us in the Trades Union Congress on Friday when I was there for him being unveiled as Labour leader. We could see more of that. Again, he's making a big speech tomorrow, laying out his plans and how he'll pay for them. That may even be seen at times by some as a mini budget, and the Speaker of the House of Commons might wonder why on earth Parliament isn't around to debate the issues being discussed by Andy Burnham. Parliament won't sit again until the 2nd of September, 43 days from now. By then, a lot might have changed in this government.
Hey, Chris, we'll come back to you for the further Burnham bloodbath throughout the afternoon. It might be nice to see somebody getting a job rather than people losing their jobs. Thank you very much there, Chris. Down on Downing Street, coming back to you when there's more breaking news. Let's get back to the studio in Westminster. I'm delighted to be joined by the Labour Party peer and the former minister, great friend of the channel, Steve McCabe. Steve, always a pleasure to have your company. Let's go through the Burnham bloodbath so far. Steve Reid, gone from Housing. David Lammy, Justice Deputy, gone. Rachel Reeves, Chancellor, gone. Peter Carr, Business, gone. Lord Hermer, Attorney General, gone. A bloodbath here of the Starmer loyalists. Are you surprised?
Well, I'm not that surprised, to be honest. I mean, I think a number of them could quite easily have continued in their jobs, but I think if you want to signal you're going to be some great change agent, then you have to clear out the people who were associated with Keir. It reminds me of those kind of days when Everton used to get a new manager and they started by gutting the team, so I don't know if that's what Andy's relying on at the moment.
But I wonder who's going to take all these places. There's a lot of empty boots all of a sudden in this dressing room, and the problem is the players on the bench, as it were, the ministers in waiting, they've all been in Starmer's government. They've all done a cock-handed job of it.
Well, I think it's true that there's most people he is likely to call and have had their chance before. Look, I don't really know that, and I'm not criticising who may come in, but I don't really know if anyone who's coming in is going to do anything dramatically different.
Rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Well, the problems that existed when people woke up yesterday morning in the economy, in defence, in productivity, in our public services, they are exactly the same today as they were yesterday, and they will be tomorrow. So, I mean, we can have the nice mood music, the change in style, all of that's important, but I think as many people have said in the last couple of days, the real answer is delivery, and we need to see, can there be any massive, significant change in delivery?
Steve, I think you're exactly right. Vibes only go so far. They only last so long until people can feel, see, taste and experience genuine change in their pockets, in their communities, at our borders. Then it's the same old. And look at the personnel. Can we just talk momentarily about Rachel Reeves? Do you finally admit now that she's thrown her hat in, that she basically was out of her depth?
No, actually, I think she did make some early mistakes, and I think she was conned by the Treasury over the winter fuel issue in the early days. But actually, I think as time went on, she was actually beginning to make a bit of progress, and I feel personally a bit sorry for Rachel Reeves, because I wonder what might have happened if she'd had a bit more time. But you know, if you're that closely associated with the Prime Minister and his project, then clearly you're not going to be in the same job or probably the cabinet of the new Prime Minister.
Steve, all eyes on the Chancellor's post, and we were already hearing a lot of rumblings about taxation being cut for the lowest earners. Great, but that's got to be paid for somehow, Steve. 50p tax rate. Shabana Mahmood is the front-runner for the Chancellor's post. She's spoken historically about how it's the wrong thing to do for the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition back in 2014 to cut the top rate of tax, 50p. She said it would be the responsibility of the next Labour government to increase taxation back to 50p. But if they do that, Steve, they're completely running a coach and horses through the Labour Party's manifesto. They've got no mandate to start whacking up tax.
Well, I mean, I think there's very little space for tax cuts at the present time, to be perfectly honest. You know, the economy is still struggling. We still have massive debt and interest repayments you know, productivity is still very poor. So it's hard to see how there can be any space for tax cuts. I am wary of simple ideas to raise extra revenue, because I think we've been through all this before, and I'm struggling to think of one that's been a success.
Yeah. What about the smaller tax increases? We hear about land taxes, we hear about property taxes, we're hearing about inheritance tax hikes to pay for social care, but again, all of this is far to the left of what anybody voted for back in July 2024.
Well, I mean, you know, they're kind of standard speculation that comes around when anybody says there might be a change. My own view is we should put more effort into tax evasion. That would be the easiest way.
You mean more effort into clamping down?
Clamping down on it, yes, of course. That would more effort into it. No, more effort into clamping down. You know, that'd be the easiest way to bring in maybe an extra 10 billion a year or something. So, you know, people should pay their fair share, and people would be much more willing to pay their tax if they thought everyone was paying their fair share.
Steve, you can see their live pictures on Downing Street. The world's press is now packing around there, waiting for the first of the new guard, as it were, the first of the new cabinets, the new intake from Andy Burnham to walk down. Who would you like to see ensconced in the cabinet, and how on earth can they change a country, as you say, already up to our neck in debt?
Well, I mean, I don't think there are any easy answers, and, you know, it would be a bit like me saying who should play for England or something. Yeah, I don't think there are any easy answers. I don't think we're going to do any favours with our partners and with the banks and with the markets if we make too many radical changes in the economic outlook at this time. What we're trying to do is steady the ship so that we can make progress. We're not trying to signal some massive change in direction, as far as I can see, because the last person who tried to do that was Liz Truss, and we know what happened then.
Steve McCabe, let's talk about Lord Hermer, now the former Attorney General, seen by many as the architect of the Chagos surrender deal, beloved of Brussels, used to adore the European Convention on Human Rights, seen by many on the right of politics as, how should we put this, putting the requirements and the needs of overseas territories before those of the United Kingdom. Are you sad to see the back of Lord Hermer?
No, I'm not at all. I think he actually was a damn decent minister. He was a man who was brought in to actually apply the law as he understood it and make sure that Britain behaved within the law. I think actually his advice on, for example, whether or not we should have got involved in President Trump's Iraq war was very valuable to the Prime Minister. So I don't welcome his departure at all. But, you know, there'll be a law officer appointed by Andy Burnham, and the same issues will arise for that law officer. Sometimes he'll have to tell the Prime Minister things he doesn't want to hear.
Thank you very much, Lord McCabe. As we just quickly await any action on Downing Street there, we are still waiting, of course, for the the first of Andy Burnham's first cabinet to emerge down Downing Street. Chris Hope will grab them as and when they happen. Can we have a political footnote, Lord McCabe, for David Lammy? Have we now finally seen the silence of the Lammy?
Well, I think David, I saw a comment from him earlier himself that he said he was planning to return to the back benches and, you know, serve his constituents, and that he was proud to have had the opportunities he's had to serve and to be the first black person to be the Deputy Prime Minister of this country. So I think David's come to the end. I think he was ill-advised over the issue of jury trials, and it's maybe not helped his position too much, to be perfectly honest. I always thought he'd have been much smarter to have offered that as a pilot instead of the full-scale change that he was threatening. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if the next Justice Secretary of one of their first decisions is to drop that plan.
And let's talk about Peter Kyle, Business Secretary again. He's gone out the door, as did Steve Reed at Housing. You've been in politics a long time, Steve. You've seen major reshuffles like this. This is the purging of those closest to Keir Starmer. So far, so predictable?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that surprising about it. And both Peter and Steve are people who, you know, are relatively young, have been in politics a moderately short period of time, and who knows? I mean, we may well see them back at some point. These things come and go. But I'm not particularly surprised by anyone who's gone so far.
Lord McCabe, can I talk to you about rent controls? We just heard from Andy Burnham, gave a speech a moment ago about the prospect of rent controls. Rent controls, of course, very, very popular with the political left. The Green Party has been talking about them during its recent political charge. The new mayor of New York talks about rent controls there. They're very, very appealing, particularly to younger people, particularly those who live in urban areas who find that rent is sapping away a great part of their salary. They can't afford to save for a house. It sounds great. The problem is they don't work. When the state starts poking its snout into the private housing market, landlords get afraid, they sell up, they clear off, there's a collapse. And until you control the borders and stop people coming into the country, demand will always outstrip supply. Do you agree that it sounds great on paper for a government to say they can control rent and lower rent? In practice, Steve, it's a promise they won't be able to deliver on.
Well, I think the experience of attempts to impose rent controls in the past is that they sound better and they're harder to implement than people sometimes think.
Jeremy Corbyn wanted to do.
I think where you're experiencing really exorbitant rises in rents to the point that it is creating massive difficulties, then there is an idea for looking at what you might be able to do. And there are other examples of trying to contain it in smaller ways.
You could control immigration.
Well, I think that actually, I think Keir Starmer would point out this morning that it has, despite all the criticism, been one of his successes, that immigration is down substantially at the moment. It's still, I'm not saying that some areas don't experience problems, but it has come down. No, I mean, I think the thing about rent controls is they sound attractive and seductive. I'm not convinced that they're that easy to implement, and I'm not convinced that they're that easy to implement fairly on a national scale.
Who are you expecting to be brought in as Chancellor? Let's get to the good news day. It's been a bad news day for Steve Reid. He's gone as housing. It's been a bad news day for David Lammy, gone as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, former Foreign Secretary. Of course, bad news day for now the former Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Bad news day for the former Business Secretary, Peter Kyle. Bad news day now for the former Attorney General, Lord Hermer. Who do you like to see ensconced as the new Chancellor, Steve McCabe, and why?
Well, I'm not entirely sure who it will be. I mean, obviously, all the talk is...
Who do you like it to be?
Well, all the talk is Shabana. I'd be interested to see if that actually pans out or if people have maybe got that wrong. If I was to pick someone, I'd probably... This is the kiss of death for him, obviously, but I'd probably pick Pat McFadden. I think we need a good, steady pair of hands. Perhaps too closely associated with Keir and therefore an unlikely runner, but I think he would be one of my choices.
But then I think, I mean, look, he's got experience. He's a safe pair of hands, but is he the dynamism that the party needs? But it's worth pointing out, Shabana Mahmood is a trained lawyer. You know, she's not a trained economist.
Well, that's true, but I don't think... I think I'm right in saying Kenneth Clarke wasn't a trained economist either, and you know, there have been a number of other people who haven't done that job.
Okay, Lord McCabe, got to cut across you now. Let's get to our political editor, Chris Hope. Got some more breaking news for us there, down on Downing Street. Chris, what do you got for us? We can't hear Chris.
Most recently, the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. Can you hear me now? Forgive me. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? OK. Martin, Liz Kendall has quit. Liz Kendall has quit the government. She is the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, formerly at Work and Pensions. She is gone. That is another key ally of Keir Starmer. She says she wishes whoever takes on this brief the very best of luck in the future. She's fortunate, or she or he will be fortunate to oversee what to her mind is the most exciting and transformative brief in government. I'll continue to serve the people of Leicester East as their MP, Leicester West as their MP, and work to ensure that Labour government delivers the change it promised at the general election for my constituents and people across the country. So Liz Kendall quits. Martin, this is nothing less than the night of the long eyelashes. This is senior figures being cleared out, lied to Keir Starmer from this government. We've seen Rachel Reeves go. We should offered a bigger job and didn't take it. I think that was the defence job. That's not confirmed by the team around her. Also gone is Steve Reed, the Housing Secretary, Lord Hermer, the Attorney General. Others too, a clear out of people who are allied to Keir Starmer. The most recent now is Liz Kendall. I'm now hearing, just on guidance, that we're not going to get the appointments till as late as 6 o'clock. That's 2 hours later than we thought. Now, if these appointments are delayed till 6, that is not planned, and that to me suggests that maybe Rachel Reeves not going to that big job in government as planned means they're trying to move other jobs around to make up for that. And that is always a case with a reshuffle. If one person doesn't go to the place you think they'll go to, the whole thing must be rethought. It's like a complicated game of 3D chess or Jenga. If one piece won't slightly go where it's meant to go, the whole thing can collapse. And that's why we're seeing a delay in Andy Burnham's first cabinet, delayed now until 6 p.m. for the appointments. It was meant to be 4 p.m.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, over there at Downing Street, it is turning into Andy Burnham's bloodbath. The night of the long eyelashes, Chris, if that was yours, you deserve several points in the Westminster Arms when I see you next. We'll come back to you, Chris, for some more breaking news as it happens. Quickly recap where we are this afternoon. Steve Reed, Housing, gone. David Lammy, Justice, Deputy PM, gone. Rachel Reeves, Chancellor, gone. Peter Kyle, Business Secretary, gone. Lord Hermer, Attorney General, gone. And we've just learned in these past couple of moments, announced on Twitter, X, 3 minutes ago, Liz Kendall, Department of Science and Innovation, gone. And we just heard there from Chris Hope, because so many people are resigning so quickly, Andy Burnham's reshuffle has now been pushed back to 6 o'clock. Perhaps some of these people that have jumped ship, he wanted to be on HMS Burnham, but I'm afraid they've jumped overboard. Burnham is looking a bit stranded at sea as it stands. Now, got some more news for you here. GBNews understands Andy Burnham hasn't ruled out introducing a new 50p tax rate. Well, that was never in the manifesto. He's got no mandate to do that. I'm joined in the studio now by the head of advocacy at the Institute for Public Policy Research, Rachel Heaton. Rachel, thank you for waiting patiently on this very quick breaking news day. Tony Blair, education, education, education. A lot of people are fearing Andy Burnham's going to be taxation, taxation, taxation. This is a severe attack to the left. 50p tax rates was never in the manifesto.
Look, I'd like him to focus on tax fairness. Not all tax is made equal. It doesn't affect people in the same way. So I think we can all recognise that ordinary people are feeling really squeezed, but there are really sensible ways of raising billions in tax without hitting ordinary people. That's because we have an incredibly unfair, dysfunctional tax system where huge corporations and very wealthy people pay way lower rates of tax than ordinary people. So if the government really does want to get serious about giving people some relief on the cost of living, with energy bills, with housing costs, and fixing social care and all of these things, it's likely that they will need to raise some money. But I think there's eminently sensible ways to do it without hitting working people. We can get some of those vested interests paying some more money where we know that it's going to be fair to do so.
But top rate taxpayers are working people. They already pay, the top 10% of tax earners in the UK already pay 60% of all taxes. Wealth taxes don't work. You introduce them in places like France, then your wealthiest clear off. There's a lot of evidence to show tax revenue goes down if you increase tax.
So look, I would actually look at income from assets and some of these incredibly dysfunctional taxes like our property tax system, council taxes. That is a huge public policy failure. We at the moment have a system where a semi house, very ordinary house in the northeast is paying less tax than a mansion in the southeast. That just cannot be right. So I don't think we necessarily need to even look at income tax in the first instance. I would actually look to taxes like that. Property taxes, capital gains taxes, a tax on banks. It's not staff taxes. And I actually don't think the government should be ashamed about it, because I think that you can do all of these things in a way that is actually good for growth. Because what we have at the moment is we have distortions, inequities and loopholes that actually really push businesses to make decisions on the basis of these inequities in the tax system rather than growth, productivity enhancing, mechanisms. So I think it's much better for the government to be upfront about it and say that these things have been very unfair, there have been public policy failures, and we're going to tackle them because we're on ordinary people's side.
What happens, Rachel, when wealth taxes, mansion taxes start making pensioners homeless? Because that's what happens in places like France. People who are asset rich and cash poor suddenly find that they have a huge asset and their council tax goes to frightening levels, the likes of which they've never been faced with their entire lives. It would be a disaster. It would be cruel.
That is often a concern that's put across. And look, France's wealth tax, some of the concern with that was that it was levied at a very low rate. I think what we have at the moment is we have a council tax system, essentially a property tax system, that really doesn't make any differentiation, for example, on a property that is worth 2 million versus 20 million. That's actually incredibly different rates. So I think we can actually do really sensible things that won't penalise people. But I also think that we need to be honest about sometimes society does need to change. Sometimes, it might not make sense for older people to stay in houses for really long waits of time. If somebody's living in a 10-bedroom house and they're one person.
That'd be pretty unlikely and pretty rare. And a lot of people...
I agree. And there's ways that you can protect against
a lot of older people want the dignity of staying in the home of their lifetime without being forced to move out by a left-wing government. That's not fair.
Look, the other thing that I would honestly say is all of these difficult situations with the tax system, we have millions of taxes that are totally dysfunctional and could really raise billions. So property tax is one, but also capital gains tax at the moment. People are earning, people who earn their money from investments, from assets, are paying far lower rates of tax than ordinary workers.
But if you
that cannot be right.
But
so
if equity with income tax was applied to capital gains tax in Britain, we would have the highest wealth taxes in all of Europe. People would leave the country.
But what you should do, and the reason that a higher rate would be justified, you could have a system like Thatcher's Chancellor Nigel Lawson had, where you protect investment, so it's a real growth-enhancing mechanism. The money that investors are putting in is protected. That actually really will incentivise growth, incentivise people who are genuinely doing productive investment, but it will take some of the people who are really gaming the capital gains tax system and are essentially taking their labour, their income, they are kind of swindling it and using it in a way to essentially use that lower rate of capital gains tax. That is something that 70% of the capital gains tax system does at the moment, and we don't. That isn't a good thing for
Rachel
business
Heaton,
or growth.
superb. Lord McCabe, I want to bring you in now. We're going to hear lots and lots of very well-meaning, high-minded and very carefully thought-out tax increases over the coming months. What about cuts? What about benefits cuts? We need to tighten the public purse, not go after more people to pay for people on benefits. And here's the point. Andy Burnham, as a parliamentarian, never once voted to cut benefits and voted many times to increase them. Are we already seeing the beginnings of a high-tax, high-spend socialist government?
Well, I wouldn't automatically jump to that conclusion if I was you. Look, I think it may be fair to say that one of the problems with not having a challenge for the leadership is we haven't had this debate. We haven't actually had a chance to air the arguments about different sorts of taxes. And I actually think a lot of things that Rachel said there have a great deal of validity, but we haven't heard that. We know that there is some difficulty in the Keir Starmer's government about cuts in welfare, but nonetheless, there is a clear direction emerging. 16 to 25-year-olds should not get benefits unless they're in some kind of, and they're fit for work, some kind of employment, training or apprenticeships. And we should look absolutely more carefully at people with disabilities. There are plenty of people with disabilities who want to work. What they need is the support and the help to get into work and to be earners. So the issue about welfare is making welfare work so that people get into work. It's not about saying there's some great virtue in welfare cuts. It's about using welfare in a constructive and positive way.
Rachel Heaton, I'd like to bring you back in on this, because a lot of people watching the show will be, this is just a great giveaway. You know, it's about taking taxes off the wealthiest who might not passively accept that. We live in a very fluid world where they can go anywhere they want, to more welcoming tax regimes, for example, and simply giving it away to those on benefits. And we saw, even with Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet, with his government, when benefits cuts were on the table, it couldn't get through Parliament. And we all accept, I think, that Burnham is to the left of Sir Keir Starmer. This is a government already that seems to be about taking more money from the wealthiest and giving it away to the poor. Now, you can be Robin Hood all you like, but the fact of the matter is we can't afford our benefits bill. Surely it's a good idea to make some cuts as well.
Look, I agree that we do definitely want the benefit system to work, to encourage people to go into work. You know, at the moment, it is really concerning that we have, 1 million, young people not in education, employment or training. But I don't think probably the best way to do that is just overnight slash their benefits.
Why not?
I think it's to genuinely give them support to actively get into work. Sometimes young people aren't going to be able to work because they may really be suffering with, big
ADHD, acne,
they could be suffering with genuine mental health issues. They could not have housing. They may not have the transport to get them to jobs. Look, we think
they could be on the take as well. They could be conning it.
I think genuinely most people want to work, and I think young people, a productive environment where they feel valued, they will want to work and go out to work. One thing we've got to remember as well is that 70% of people on benefits are in work. So it's actually, a bit of a fallacy to make out like people who are receiving benefits are not actually hard-working people who are doing their best to go out and earn a living. So while I think there are dysfunctions with the benefit system, and I absolutely encourage a government looking at it.
Face-to-face appointments.
I would want to make sure it was done in a way that was not cruel and was not arbitrary and actively looked at what we want to get out of this. We want people in work, doing productive work and feeling part of the economy and contributing. One last thing I would just quickly say is not all taxes go to benefits. They go to many things that the public really value. Our NHS, our schools, covering up potholes.
But again, surely we should be looking to cut costs. Look, we can't just throw money. Look at the state of our roads. If we threw billions of pounds at potholes, are we convinced, Steve, they would actually go to fixing potholes, or would they go on more bureaucracy? Devolution of power, it means more bureaucrats in town halls, more government, a bigger state, bigger costs.
Well, the argument about efficiency in all spending is crucial, and actually probably too many governments for too long haven't actually had that much control. But we've just had the inquiry into COVID, and we've seen how the previous government saw public money when it came to vital things like PPE. So, it's not a new argument about efficiency in spending. It's a pretty old argument. The argument about devolution is devolution could be perceived as a chance for more government. Equally, if the decisions that really mattered were made much closer to home, then they could be made more efficiently and it might actually be less costly. I think the jury's out on that. I don't pretend to know that, but I don't think I should jump to that automatic conclusion. What I want to see is the money spent wisely and people to be honest about the things that we've got to face. There are tough decisions ahead, and there will be things that will have to be cut and deferred, and the government should face up to that, and it should make the public face up to it.
OK, Lord Steve McCabe, thank you, as ever, for your expertise. Thank you, Rachel Heaton, for joining us in the studio. Let's just remind ourselves at the end of this hour who has now been sacked from the government so far. The Burnham bloodbath is well underway. We've seen some big hitters by the bullet. Rachel Reeves, now the former Chancellor. David Lammy, now the former Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. He's gone. Peter Kyle, who of course was the former Business Secretary, he's bitten the bullet. Rachel Reeves, of course, resigned from her role as the Chancellor, and GB News can confirm that she was offered a significant new role under Andy Burnham's government, but she told him to go and shove it. That might explain why the reshuffle has now been delayed until 6 o'clock. It seems that Andy Burnham wanted Rachel Reeves in it, and she said, get stuffed. She posted the following statement on X. She said, it's been the privilege of my life to serve as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I wish the very best of luck to my successor, Andy, and the Cabinet. Quickly, the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, he also resigned from government. And to conclude this hour's confirmation of the resignations, the sackings, Lord Hermer, now the former Attorney General, and we learned in these past few moments, Liz Kendall has gone as a deputy of the Department for Science and Innovation. The bloodletting is fully underway. There'll be much more of it. Plus, we might see some people going in the front door rather than everyone going through the trap door. Stick with us. There's going to be a huge amount of politics over this next hour.
Thank you, Britain, for all of you who listen to GB News Radio.
Whether you're at home or on the go, you're making us Britain's news channel and Britain's radio station.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. There is a collision on the M11 southbound between junctions 7 and 6 near Thaden Boy. In Scotland, the A720 westbound between the A7 Sheriff Hall roundabout and the A68 Miller Hill junction has 2 lanes restricted, causing queues. Across Wales, the A4232 northbound from A48 interchange to M4 J33 Capel Llanilturn is congested with possible delays. And on the trains, there is major disruption on Grand Central and Great Northern services between London King's Cross and Stevenage. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
What would you do with £60,000 cash? What would you do with a real gold bar? Well, both have to be won in our Golden Summer celebration. First, there's £60,000 in tax-free cash to bolster your bank account this year. Plus, we'll also give you a fine gold bar worth over £5,000. For a chance to win, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
At the stroke of midnight, the news doesn't stop, and neither do we.
Day in, day out. Forget stuffy late night TV shows. We're giving you a front row ticket to the centre of the political universe.
Because breaking news doesn't wait for the morning.
And neither do we. Join us for one of the most controversial and volatile times of politics in human history.
A very big story.
Big story over here.
You won't get this anywhere else. The Late Show live at midnight, every night.
Only on GB News.
Bo, they are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline.
Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. What a day in politics. Welcome to the Martin Dalby Show here on GB News, broadcasting for you until 6 p.m. on this historic day. Top story this hour is becoming the Burnham bloodbath. As the new Prime Minister has already begun a cabinet reshuffle, and we've seen some big hitters by the bullet. First off, Rachel Reeves, David Lammy, Peter Kyle and Steve Reid all leave Burnham's new cabinet, and we're expecting a big cabinet announcement any moment soon. Let's get back to our political editor Chris Hope, who's there for us on Downing Street. Chris, so far it's all been bodies through the trapdoor. Will anybody going to be through that front door there at Downing Street to actually get a job anytime soon?
Martin, I'm talking to you with half an eye on the gate at the end of Downing Street, about 200 yards away. We're expecting the first appointment of Sir Keir Starmer's new government to walk through it. Of Andy Burnham's new government. I must get used to this, I'm so sorry. Andy Burnham's new government to be made shortly. I can add another name to your list of people leaving the government. Jo Stevens, she's the Welsh Secretary. That's the 7th person to leave the cabinet. Of course, that's about a quarter of the cabinet have now lost their jobs as Andy Burnham takes over. That's why we're calling it the night of the long eyelashes, of course. That's because Andy Burnham has long eyelashes. It was a point suggested in the PMQs, of course, by Kemi Badenoch. So we're looking over to my left here. I can't quite see anyone coming through the gate next just yet. All journalists are craning their neck to see who is the first appointment of Andy Burnham's government. The first one should be arriving very, very shortly in Downing Street. The rest after 6 p.m. This is a delayed reshuffle. We were expecting more names to be announced by 4 o'clock. It seems that what's happened, as you were saying earlier, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was offered a big job. That is confirmed by sources in Whitehall. I think that was the Defence Secretary's job, and that's what appears to have happened. And because she hasn't gone to Defence, other jobs are being worked out, and that has delayed the whole reshuffle by Andy Burnham. This is quite normal. It can happen when it happens like this. Previous administrations have had the similar problems with reshuffles. It's never straightforward because some people don't want to have jobs and won't move to jobs they're being given. But as I said, I heard yesterday on very good authority, Rachel Reeves would have been offered the Defence Secretary's job, but now she is refused to take a big job in government. That can be confirmed. So others who have gone so far: Steve Reed, David Lammy, of course, David Lammy being the Deputy Prime Minister, now the former Justice Secretary. Also, Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, closely allied, it seems, to Attorney General and Liz Kendall. Now, I can tell you that outside Downing Street now is surprising news for you. John Healey, the former Defence Secretary, is waiting outside number 10 to come in. That is extraordinary news. So it could well be that John Healey is about to walk down Downing Street. He, of course, resigned, didn't he, over the defence settlement forced on him by the Treasury. 5 billion of the Defence Investment Plan not settled. But there are now suggestions in Whitehall amongst reporters that John Healey is set to be unveiled probably as the Chancellor. I'm looking down the street now. Bear with me while I crane my neck. I can't quite see who's coming down the street. We have got a camera on that gate. But this could be a big return for John Healey, someone who wasn't expected. He is waiting to enter Downing Street right now. We're not sure why. It may be because he's going to be given one of the top jobs in government, and normally the first job that any Prime Minister makes is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So I can confirm that John Healey is waiting to enter Downing Street. Martin, this is highly dramatic and not expected. We all expected Shabana Mahmood to be given that job as Chancellor. Some were saying she didn't have enough experience as a former shadow financial secretary to the Treasury, and of course Andy Burnham has seemed to be weak on the issues of he couldn't quite spell out what the fiscal rules were when interviewed by a broadcaster 2 weeks ago. As I say, John Healey looks like he's going to be walking up the street here in Downing Street through the famous black door for a job we're not sure what is. Yeah, so we think we could see John Healey be given a top job in government. He's having his ID checked by police. Well, to get into number 10, we all have our ID checked. You would have thought that John Healey is well known to the police, but they're doing their job, to which we applaud. So quite a dramatic moment here if John Healey emerges. Martin.
Well, Chris Hope, if that is the case, when you look back over John Healey's political CV, he does have experience of working with the Treasury, Economic Secretary to the Treasury from 2002 to 2005, a Parliamentary Private Secretary prior to that to the Chancellor of the time, Gordon Brown, and a Financial Secretary to the Treasury from 2005 till 2007. Therefore, 7 years working inside or alongside the Treasury. Chris.
Martin. Well, I can confirm John Healey is now walking up. Let's see what he's got. John Healey, what job have you got?
If he's walking up the road, it means he's been given the cabinet post. And we don't know what
John Healey, what job are you getting?
Anybody we see here now is going to get a job in government.
John Healey, are you the new Chancellor? John Healey, are you the new Chancellor?
Are you taking over number 11, John Healey?
Are you in charge of tax and spend? There we have it. John Healey arriving. The first person through the door of 10 Downing Street is someone no one expected, Martin. John Healey, who resigned with grace over the defence budget, widely respected, of course, in the defence community, was not willing to accept an £11 billion settlement on the defence investment plan, that uplift caused by the greatest threats to this country. John Healey now in Downing Street. Will he emerge as the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Not a suggestion widely circulated before this. That suggests either all that speculation was wrong or something has changed. That also suggests to me maybe Shabana Mahmood staying at the Home Office, and that would explain, Martin, the delay in these appointments. We were expecting them at 4 o'clock. We know Rachel Reeves turned down a big job in government. I think that may have been as Defence Secretary. John Healey was out of government and now is coming to be Chancellor. That could explain what's going on here, but that is quite a surprise. So just to recap there for viewers and listeners tuning in right now, John Healey is the first person in 10 Downing Street after the sackings, 7 sackings or people leaving government so far. They include Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, Steve Reid, of course, the Housing Secretary, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, and also the Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, widely blamed for that, Che Gostil, which is widely criticised, not least by the White House recently, but also by the right in British politics, Liz Kendall, the Tech Secretary, also earlier James Timpson, the Prisons Minister, and others too. And Peter Carter, forgive me, the Business Secretary, he's gone. Joe Stevens, the Welsh Secretary. A clear out here of people allied to Keir Starmer. The night of the long eyelashes, as we're calling it now. Of course, Andy Burnham, known to have long eyelashes, and called that way by Kevin Badenoch, the Conservative leader. But in Downing Street right now is John Healey, the former Defence Secretary that no one saw coming.
Chris, it'd be quite the turnaround, would it not, after resigning in principle over that cut to the defence budget. Of course, John Healey wanted 18 billion, was only offered 13.5 billion. He resigned in principle, and it was interesting at the time, Chris, how that was respected across Parliament. Kemi Badenoch said that was the principled thing to do. Reform UK also said that was the right thing to do. And would it be quite the turnaround if John Healey were to be made the Chancellor? Perhaps, Chris, the first thing he would do is find that additional 5 billion quid for the MOD.
Well, that's right. I'm just checking out John Healey's background here. He's 66 years old. He has got a background in the Treasury. He was the Economic Secretary of the Treasury 2002 to 2005, and then after that he became the Financial Secretary to the Treasury. So he had 5 years working in the second and third ranking jobs in the Treasury. So it's not a complete surprise, given what's happened so far. I'm being handed me a further announcement here. Forgive me while I open it. OK, I can reveal now that Darren Jones has lost his job. Darren Jones, who was the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, that's the 8th sacking or person leaving Andy Burnham's cabinet. As I forecast earlier, 8 people have quit. That's about a third of the cabinet has gone. Andy Burnham says this on social media and Darren Jones says this on social media. From the campaign trail and TV studios to the Treasury number 10 and the Cabinet Office, it's been a privilege to be in the cabinet of a Labour government and to serve the country. Darren Jones continues, Andy Burnham has called to tell me I won't be part of his team. So therefore, Darren Jones has been sacked by Andy Burnham. I wish him and his team every success. So we can see there that Darren Jones has lost his job. Going back to the big news, though, in number 10 now is John Healey. To recap there, he had senior roles in the Treasury. in the back end of the Blair government in 2002 to 2005, and then 2005 to 2007. He then left the Treasury when Gordon Brown became Prime Minister and served in local government. Of course, since then he's been in opposition, and then he was in the Defence Department when the government was formed by Keir Starmer back in 2024. So looking back at his past, he's probably got more expertise in the Treasury than we have seen than maybe Shabana Mahmood, who had about 1 year shadowing one of the roles in the Treasury. So we'll wait and see if that's the role he's got. That could mean that Shabana Mahmood stays at the Home Office. We've known she wanted to stay there and complete the work she's doing on dealing with the small boats crisis. Of course, done quite well in the past 2 years with numbers down than where they were. But as I can say to you, surprise to us all, John Healey could be our next Chancellor.
Chris Hope, very, very dramatic breaking news, and we've been saying all along, for days, if Shabana Mahmood is made the Chancellor, then who on earth would fill her boots as Home Secretary? She's been the most admired. Even has to say, even Nigel Farage said she was making the right moves, trying to clamp down on immigration. The controversial point was extending that period of indefinite leave to remain from 5 to 10 years. Chris, you're waving your arm. You've got some more news for me.
Well, I think this is absolutely confusing everyone. If John Healey becomes Chancellor, that was not expected by anyone. That is a surprise to people who are close to Andy Burnham and where they thought this was going as a government. It is a surprise if John Healey is made Chancellor. That suggests that this reshuffle is not going as planned. It was due to start at 4 o'clock. We had no appointments, and now that's 70 minutes later. And what we're being told is John Healey is getting a big job, and it's likely that job is Chancellor. That's the first job that any reshuffle would appoint. It seems this is not expected. I'll say no more than that. This will develop through the day and night, and we'll be with you all the way through until late tonight on GB News. But the John Healey being appointed possibly to the Chancellorship is a huge surprise were that to happen. In fact, John Healey back in government is a surprise. Let's start at that point. If he gets the job in number 11 Downing Street, that is a big surprise.
Well, Chris Hope, I wonder if it is. Think about it. Resigning in principle from Defence over the missing $5 billion, felt betrayed, and as I said before, was praised across the chamber. Kemi Badenoch was very effusive in her praise. James Cartledge, Shadow Defence, was effusive in his praise for the principled move. Nigel Farage was. Reform UK were a lot of people saying it was the principled thing to do, and to walk away from Starmer's government over principle and to be welcomed through the front door first by Team Burnham sends out a strong message. But it does ask the question, where would the £5 billion come from for defence? It'll be an astonishing state of affairs, and that would leave Shabana Mahmood perhaps keeping the brief as Home Secretary. She's the most hardline of all of them, and a lot of people, they keep saying, will anything pass the Makerfield test? And yet so far, Chris Hope, Andy Burnham hasn't even mentioned immigration in any of his speeches. Didn't mention it today, didn't mention it in Manchester, didn't mention it on Friday, and the only person who seems to have an appetite to deal with immigration is Shabana Mahmood.
Well, that's quite right. Now, immigration is one of the top three areas that poll very high amongst public's concern. Cost of living crisis and the health service being the other two. To be fair to the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, he hasn't mentioned the health service. He has mentioned social care as a priority. And you're absolutely right, Martin, he hasn't mentioned immigration. Now, were Shabana Mahmood to stay in the Home Office, that would reassure, I think, those on the right of the party and also upset, I think, Reform UK. She is widely regarded as somebody who has got the grips or trying to get the grips with the immigration issue. I think if you look here, I mean, what Andy Burnham can't afford is any kind of rivalry or drama between number 11 Downing Street behind me and number 10 Downing Street behind me. It was called the TBGBs under Gordon Brown. TB, Tony Blair, GB, Gordon Brown. The TBGBs, when there was always a battle between advisors on who was in charge of tax and spend, and back then it was about joining the euro, for example, back in the back end of the last century. And that's why it matters so much to have those two sides on the same team. John Healey is 60 66, he can draw a pension, he's got a bus pass. He's not somebody who wants to be Prime Minister, put it that way. He's someone who can be trusted by Andy Burnham. It's almost Andy Burnham going back into the time when he was a special advisor under Gordon Brown. He is the vintage of people who worked under the Tony Blair government. Of course, he had those big roles under the Tony Blair in the Treasury from 2002 to 2007. So put that way, it makes a degree of sense. It's just not something anyone was calling in the past few days, if indeed we do see John Healey confirmed as Chancellor.
Thank you very much there, Chris O from Downing Street. We'll come back to you as there's more breaking news. Just to confirm, Darren Jones there, the 8th body to drop through the trapdoor. The Burnham bloodbath continues. Darren Jones has just tweeted in these past few moments, of course, the former Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, which Tom Holwood says is basically a made-up job to make people close to you. This is what the former Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, said a moment ago. From the campaign trail and the TV studios to the Treasury, Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. It's been a privilege to be in the Cabinet of a Labour government and to serve the country. Andy Burnham has called to tell me I won't be a part of his new Cabinet. I wish him and his team every success. Well, the bodies are piling up on Downing Street. Let's get some reaction in the studio. Delighted to be joined by the Labour peer and the former Minister of Law, Steve McCabe, and fresh from out there on Downing Street, GB News' Deputy Political Editor, Tom Holwood. Gentlemen, welcome to you. Lord McCabe, let's get some reaction to you first. It seems the first positive announcement on a day, let's face it, where the bodies are falling like flies, is Healey there. What do you reckon to him?
Well, I think he is emerging as the dark horse for the Chancellor's job.
Are you surprised?
I'm a bit surprised because it hadn't been mentioned before, but of course, as we've heard, I mean, John has quite a lot of experience in the Labour Party. He has experience of working under Gordon Brown at the Treasury. He's got great trade union connections from his earlier life, but he's always seen, particularly with the defence role, as being a bit sort of on the right as well. So if Andy is trying to create these kind of unity-type candidates, he's probably a very good choice for him in the circumstance. And given the number of people now who are going out, I mean, unity's looking like it could be a bit difficult. So John may turn out to be one of those surprise but remarkably good choices.
Tom Holwood is turning into a bloodbath out there. There's 8 bodies through the trapdoor. Every Starmer loyalist seemingly now on death row. Larry the Cat had better watch out.
Well, it is going to be quite difficult for Andy Burnham now to live up to his pledge that he's going to build a cabinet that represents all wings of the Labour Party, because it does seem all of the sackings have come from one wing of the Labour Party, which is the Starmer loyalists. Now, are there going to be any Starmer loyalists included in Andy Burnham's cabinet? And if not, is that going to create a problem for Andy Burnham on the back benches? I remember back to 2022 when Liz Truss appointed all of her senior cabinet as being backers of her when she was standing for the leadership. That created a big problem for Liz Truss on her back benches because it concentrated her supporters with no incentive to back her programme for government. That tossed her out in 49 days. I don't think that anyone's suspecting that will happen to Andy Burnham, but it can breed discontent. One thing I'd say on John Healey is it would be a very smart curveball choice, because ultimately, when he resigned, to a man and a woman, his political opponents from the Reform Party, Conservative Party, Liberal Democrats, all of them were saying what an honourable man he is, what a principled politician he is. It's going to be quite hard for them to row back on those comments. Frankly, he's a respected politician across the aisle in the House of Commons, and that matters.
OK, thank you, gentlemen. Stick with us. I want to get my next guest in now. That's the political strategist, James Frayne. James, welcome to the show. I was really keen to get you on today. You wrote an excellent article yesterday in the Telegraph, and you said simply the best thing Andy Burnham can do is call a snap election. What makes you think that?
Well, I think if you look at the terrible problems that Burnham has inherited from Keir Starmer, if you look at the terrible state that the economy's in, the state that the NHS is in, they still haven't got to grips with immigration, regardless of Shabana Mahmood's efforts. I think things are not going to improve anytime soon. he has had an immediate bounce of about 5 points. I suspect he'll go up a few points even more over the course of the next few weeks. He's a much better politician than Keir Starmer. Quite simply, I don't think things are going to get better for him ever, and therefore he's going to be in a much better position, I think, to call an early election. I don't think that's an election that will deliver a majority for Andy Burnham. That's not credible after the mess that Labour have made over the last year or so. But I think it would mean that he has a fighting chance of staying on as Prime Minister, maybe as the leader of a left-leaning coalition. So if I was him, I'd get on with it. And, he's clearly not a politician that avoids risk. Took on reform in Makerfield, which was theoretically a coin toss. He's, as you've said, he's been clearing out lots of Starmer dead wood, if you like, from the cabinet. He's not averse to risk. We'll see which way he jumps in the next few weeks.
And yet you point out in your excellent article that Gordon Brown missed the boat when he perhaps should have called an early election in 2010. He didn't go with logic. He went with his heart. And I wonder if that's the case here. There are hundreds of backbench MPs that would be eviscerated, perhaps. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas, do they?
No, that's the big question, isn't it? How do you persuade large numbers of Labour MPs that might be heading out the door in an election that they're sacrifices for the greater good? If he did call an election, whilst I think there is a prospect that he would still, as I say, maintain his premiership, that he would lead a left-leaning coalition, it would mean that many dozens of Labour MPs will go in pretty short order. Many of them will oppose that. As I said, they're only delaying the inevitable, because I think if Burnham does not do it very soon, the nature of the challenges that Burnham faces, everything from NHS to crime to the economy, means that he is going to fail to turn things around. The country will remain in a big mess. And in the end, he'll just end up getting swept aside, potentially as Nigel Farage takes over as the next Prime Minister. So the stakes are very high for Labour.
And yet, James Frayne, already we've seen a funeral pyre of Starmerites on Downing Street today. I mean, they are dropping like flies. Steve Reed, David Lammy, Rachel Rees, Peter Kyle, Lord Hermer, Liz Candle, Joe Stevens, and now Darren Jones. Who's left?
Well, I think it makes complete sense for him to have done this. I mean, Labour have dropped like a stone in the polls since Starmer took over. They dropped very quickly, and they kept dropping. I mean, we've all got used to it that Labour were for several months on 19 points in the polls. We've all come to think of that as being normal. That is not normal. Even in Labour's dark days of the 1980s, they were not down at those levels. So I think he has taken very serious action to clean out those people who the public will reasonably blame for a lot of the problems. Of course, what we don't know is who he brings in. I mean, it's possible that, as you guys have been discussing, that John Healey becomes Chancellor. Seems a pretty sensible decision, but we don't know yet. I mean, if he fills the cabinet with very, very, very left-wing people, then, well, that's a different matter entirely, and I think he will drop much more quickly in the polls than we might otherwise have expected.
James Frayne, superb. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate your input, as ever. Political strategist and the columnist at The Telegraph, James Frayne. Let's now speak with our national reporter, Sophie Reaper, who joins us from Manchester. Of course, the former mayor of Manchester, Sophie, is now our new Prime Minister, from Coronation Street to Downing Street.
Indeed, Martin. And on day one of Andy Burnham's premiership, we've also had day one of number 10 in the north. That, of course, is a promise made by Andy Burnham to bring power out of Westminster and see it come into devolved parts of the country like Greater Manchester. Now, it's only in temporary accommodation for now, as it were, because the site that seems to have been set aside for it, as it stands, is currently brownfield and has absolutely nothing built thought on it whatsoever. So as we understand it, for the next couple of years at least, it's going to be housed here at Heron House in Manchester city centre. And what that means is it's going to be a hub for both politicians and members of the civil service to come and to work from. Andy Burnham himself has promised that he'll spend at least one day a week here at number 10 in the north. So we've been here in Manchester today speaking to locals about what they want from the new Prime Minister and what they hope for in the future. Do you feel like Andy Burnham gives you hope for the future?
Not really, no. Because, I don't know, just the state of Manchester as it is at the minute, yeah, I wouldn't say so, no.
Well, he's done a lot good for Manchester. I'd like to see that replicated across the country.
Worst person to ask. I don't like him.
Tell me why.
Because he's not very good.
Well, it's a change, isn't it? So, yes, you've got to think positive. I do think positive, so, yeah, it's got to be a change, so, yes.
Well, some very mixed reactions there to our new Prime Minister, Martin, here in Manchester. We've got number 10 in the north now. It'll be interesting over the coming weeks and months to see just how relevant it becomes to British politics.
Thank you, Sophie Reaper, there for us live from Manchester. Back to the studio in Westminster. Just to keep you up to speed, we are expecting, we just heard John Healey to emerge from that world-famous door at Downing Street imminently. And we're expecting the first Cabinet position to be announced right before that. Tom Harwood, our man in the studio here, is keeping a beady eye on that. Our man, Chris Hope, is on Downing Street to see Mr Healey as he emerges. But quickly, back to the studio for some reaction. I'm delighted to be joined, of course, by Tom Harwood and the Labour peer and the former Minister for the Labour Party, Lord Steve McCabe. Lord McCabe, I'm going to come to you first. 2 points. James Frayne there was saying it's time for an early general election. Let's go chopper now. Chris Hope. Let's get to Chris Hope. What's the news, Chris?
OK, we haven't yet heard John Healey emerge from Downing Street, but we understand that Ed Miliband is waiting to walk up Downing Street. Now, we don't know what role Ed Miliband might be getting. It was reported earlier today that he has said goodbye to his team in the Department for Energy and Net Zero, and it has been speculated on that he would become the Foreign Secretary. Now, that would make sense because they do tend to appoint these roles in the order of their importance, the most important being Chancellor, and then the Foreign Secretary, after that the Home Secretary and others too. And I'm looking over my left shoulder here. Here comes a car down the street. Let's see who's in this car. If you bear with me, Martin, there's a car emerging now. I'm not sure who's in the car yet. The street now, and Ed Miliband's coming now. Here comes Ed Miliband, Martin. We think he could be the Foreign Secretary. I'll do my best to shout questions. Ed Miliband arriving now in Downing Street. So he has been tipped by many to be the new Foreign Secretary. It would make sense if we have John Healey and also Shabana Mahmood coming too. They're both coming now. Are you the new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband? Are you leaving the Home Office, Shabana Mahmood? Are you the new Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband? Are you staying in the Home Office, Shabana Mahmood? Are you leaving the Home Office, Shabana Mahmood? There you have Ed Miliband now arriving. Now he's smiling and laughing and backslapping with Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. That could be because he's about to get put in charge of MI6, of course, as Foreign Secretary. We'll wait and see how that plays out. MI5 boss, of course, will be the person in charge of that for the government, of course, is Shabana Mahmood. That looked quite a jolly chat there. So we don't know yet. Again, the information as it comes out, we'll bring it to you. It could be we're seeing John Healey in as Chancellor. It could be Ed Miliband in as Foreign Secretary, and it could be Shabana Mahmood is staying as the Home Secretary. We'll see how that all plays out. But in the building behind me is John Healey. Again, he came a big surprise when he emerged earlier walking down Downing Street. He could be the new Chancellor. Ed Miliband is being tipped to being the new Foreign Secretary, again not confirmed, and as I say there, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, she may be staying where she is and maybe she hasn't gone to being Chancellor. It's all fluid, Martin. In the past couple of hours, 8 members of the team around Keir Starmer in the cabinet, his loyalist lieutenants, have all left the government. The night of the long eyelashes. Rachel Reeves, Steve Reed, David Lammy, Liz Kendall, Darren Jones, Joe Stevens, Lord Hermer, Peter Kyle, all got from the cabinet. That's 8 members of the cabinet. That's 1 in 3 of the cabinet losing their jobs. Others too: James Timpson, the Justice Minister, Patrick Vallance, the Science Minister. So a big clear out here of people who are aligned, who are close to Keir Starmer. And I would say those people who have gone from the cabinet were the ones who are lined up to hear Sir Keir Starmer leave government back at when his speech back at 11 o'clock this morning. All eyes on the door behind me, 11 Downing Street, because it is possible we may see the new Chancellor emerge from there and grin for the cameras. As I say, to recap, behind us, John Healey is in the building. He could well be the new Chancellor. Ed Miliband, the Net Zero department, he said goodbye to that department earlier today. He is without a job in government. He's gone to the main front door. That means he's getting one of the big jobs, one of the great offices of state, possibly Foreign Secretary. Of course, if you're Foreign Secretary, you're also in charge of the aid budget, now down just to 0.2% of GDP. He'll want to bring that up to 0.7% of GDP, as it was under the Tories and before there was a real pressure on the defence budget. He could get that job. And also we saw Shabana Mahmood there walking in as the, we think, staying on as the Home Secretary. Again, all conjecture, all speculation, but very exciting times here in Downing Street. Martin.
Well, Chris Hope, the 3 big officers of state there, of course, on top of the Prime Minister's brief. John Healey, we're hearing, could be Chancellor, of course, resigned in principle over the £5 billion discrepancy between the budget he wanted at the Ministry of Defence and the budget Keir Starmer offered him. Ed Miliband, Foreign Secretary. Now, you might say, putting Ed Miliband in Kazakhstan, sailing on an endless global tour, might be the way of doing the minimum amount of damage. But you mentioned there, Chris, there could be an increase in foreign aid. Well, that'd be very, very hard to sign off, certainly with the Red Wall, certainly with all of the people that lean towards Labour, potentially from Reform UK. Shabana Mahmood sticking as Home Secretary, and that could be canny politics, because a lot of people on the political right felt she was making the best fist of that position, and who could replace her. Almost everybody else in the Labour government is to the political left of her position, although she's not right-wing herself. But you know what I'm saying, Chris. So the big officers are being filled as we speak, but the bodies are falling like flies. And Chris, the more you say the night of the long eyelashes, the better it gets.
Well, that's right, 8 jobs gone from the team around Sir Keir Starmer. I just wonder, though, Ed Miliband moving away from that net zero department, the energy department, often with your biggest rivals, what you want to do is put them on a plane and make them travel the world. Well, that's how you do it as a Foreign Secretary. That's why Theresa May made Boris Johnson Foreign Secretary after the Brexit referendum in 2016. That was seen by many as putting a rival for your job on a plane, flying around the world as a chief diplomat. That is a job which Ed Miliband will get. I'm sure that it's been sweetened by the fact you're in control of the aid department, and with a target of getting towards 0.7%. But of course that will hang on priorities of this government, on increasing the size of the economy. That will take some time. And of course, going from what we've heard from Ed Miliband, from Andy Burnham, his priorities dealing with a cost of living crisis and those on the lowest income, and aid will come second to that. But it's a way certainly of dealing with someone who you may fear wants your job, or may want your job in the future. Of course, we understand Keir Starmer was not very happy with the way Ed Miliband urged Keir Starmer to set out a timetable to quit the government around the time of that heavy defeat in the local elections in May. And it may be that you've got some clever politics here. Putting Ed Miliband in that role at the Foreign Office means he's flying around the world, hasn't got time to muster forces against you. And frankly, I think this government can barely afford that with the time allowed. So we're still waiting to see who might emerge from the building behind me. John Healey's inside, as I said there. So is Ed Miliband, who we think was the Energy Secretary. We think is leaving that role, could be the new Foreign Secretary, and we expect Shabana Mahmood to stay on at the Home Office as she wanted. That's what we know so far, but it's been a huge moment here, a clearing away of ministers allied to Sir Keir Starmer. In come people allied to where Andy Burnham wants to take this country.
Deadwood being swept down Downing Street there. Chris Hope, thank you very much. We'll come back to you for more as the breaking news comes through. You've been superb. Back to the studio in Westminster, and I'm delighted to be joined by the former Conservative MP and, of course, the GB News presenter, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Labour peer, former Minister, Lord Steve McCabe, and, of course, GB News' Deputy Presenter, Tom Harwood. So, Jacob, may I start with you? This is turning into something of a bloodbath. Is that a good or a bad thing?
I think it's a fundamental error. I think that new leaders need to be generous and to keep people where they can. So when Boris came in, lots of people wanted to go because they hated his view on Brexit and so on and so forth. And that's different. But Gordon Brown kept most of Tony Blair's cabinet to have a smooth transition. Last week, you had Burnham saying he wanted to stop the briefing culture, he wanted to bring the party together. And now he's fired reasonably competent ministers who happen to support Starmer. And who am I thinking of? Because some of them weren't reasonably competent and deserved to go. I'm thinking of Darren Jones. Darren Jones is an able man. Thinking of Liz Kendall. Though I didn't agree with it, she was competently introducing the controls on under 16-year-olds using social media. And when you appear to be vindictive, then you leave people on the back benches who, when you stumble, will not be there to catch you, but will be there to give you a little bit of a push to make you stumble more.
Could I ask you specifically about Ed Miliband? We've just seen him walk up Downing Street a few minutes ago. He's tipped to be the Foreign Secretary. Now, the Net Zero Secretary, as he stands, is seen as a bit of a barrier to Burnhamism. Will we drill, baby drill? The business community rather nervous. We know energy prices in Britain are exorbitant. Foreign Secretary, well, his carbon footprint will certainly increase.
His carbon footprint will increase, and he won't do anything of any consequence. That the Foreign Secretaryship is one that we have in our minds is a great office because Palmerston held it, and huge figures from our past were powerful foreign secretaries. Nowadays, the reality is, as Boris Johnson always used to say, you just go around the world in a cigar tube, and all the decisions are made in Downing Street. So you become a grand panjandrum, and you have brass bands when you step off the aeroplane, and it's all rather marvellous. You don't actually do anything. And as I actually think Ed Miliband is an intelligent man, but very dangerous in terms of his policies, and a rather nice man, I'm delighted he's got a safe berth where he can't do any damage.
So the political equivalent of sending them to Coventry, but send them to Kazakhstan?
Well, you give them a very grand-sounding job. You give them a nice couple of houses, one in London and one in Kent. So they're looked after, they travel in private jets, they stay in embassies, which are jolly comfortable. It's all very nice, but it's not a frontline political role. It's grand, but it's not important. It's like being the Lord Great Chamberlain, a wonderful, grand title, and you have a special uniform for state events, but you're not really running the country.
So, Jacob, John Healey, the first through that door this afternoon, we're expecting to hear he may be announced as the Chancellor, perhaps a surprise announcement, yet he quit very recently with dignity. And I think you were effusively appreciative of his resignation through principle from Defence.
I admired his resignation. It's rare that you get political resignations based on understanding that your department is being badly treated and that therefore you have to go. There are examples that we could go through, but they're very rare. And he didn't have to resign. He could have stayed on. And so I'm not sorry he's being brought back. Very interesting if he's Chancellor. I'm afraid I don't know what his economic thoughts are. But Burnham is starting, at the moment, in exactly the same way as Starmer did. We are getting lots of briefings about things may happen. There may be rent controls. There may be a 50% income tax. There may be increased capital gains tax. There may be a wealth tax. There may be a land value tax. We had 3 or 4 months of that in 2024, and it led to uncertainty, it led to investment being lost, and it led to the economy declining. It would be very serious if we do that again. So if he has gone to the Treasury, his first objective must be to clamp down on the briefings and the rumours that cause economic uncertainty.
May I finally get your take before I move to Lord McCabe on Shabana Mahmood? The inklings we're hearing that she will maintain the brief of Home Secretary. Do you think that's canny politics?
Oh, I think it's very canny politics, except it may be very unpopular on the left of the Labour Party. That Shabana Mahmood is popular with all the wrong people. She's popular with people like me and Nigel Farage, and on you go. She isn't popular with the backbench of the Labour Party. This is a risk. You always have to remember that you serve in high office with the support of your backbenchers, not the admiration of your political opponents. And so, yes, because I think she is serious about migration, but it may make people a little bit nervous on the left who've supported Burnham. If Ed Miliband isn't becoming Chancellor and Shabana Mahmood has maintained her position as Home Secretary, is he perhaps not so left-wing after all?
Lord McCabe, let's get your thoughts on that. Shabana Mahmood, as we said, she's seen as somebody who stands her ground, but as Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg said there, she's admired by Nigel Farage. She's admired by a lot of our viewers and listeners, admired by Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Ed Miliband, maybe the safest place for him is to be sent on endless. In fact, let's get back now to our man on Downing Street, Chris Hope. Chris, what you got for us?
I think we've got Louise Haigh is coming down the street. Now, she, of course, ran the campaign in Makerfield to get Andy Burnham back into politics. I think it's Louise Haigh. Lou Haigh, what job have you got?
Thank you very much for joining us.
Louise Haigh, what job do you want? She's rumoured to be the Chancellor for the Duchy of Lancaster. Louise Haigh, what job do you want in government?
Louise Haigh, what job are you getting?
Are you the new CDL?
Louise Haigh, you Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
That's Louise Haigh arriving now, of course. So slightly looking quite serious there for Louise Haigh, but there she is. I mean, that's she is someone who's tipped to be the Chancellor for the Duchy of Lancaster. What does that mean in English? That means a top job in the Cabinet Office Department. That's why it's so important. But she'll be the enforcer for Andy Burnham in Whitehall. So Louise Haigh doing that role. So there's quite a big party in now. They're having a drink. What's going on inside? So far, let's think again who's inside. We've got John Healey inside. We've got Ed Miliband and Shabana Mahmood. And also now Louise Haigh. Are they having a party? Are they doing any work? Let's wait and see. Waiting to see when they emerge from here, Martin. But it has been the night of the long eyelashes. We've seen 8 members of the Cabinet leaving. We've now got four people who should be getting roles in the Cabinet inside. We are not sure what roles they're getting. As I say there, we think Louise Haigh has gone in to be the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. That's a job that was held in the past by Michael Gove, famously during the COVID pandemic. Traditionally, it's a job which enforces the will and the ideas of the Prime Minister in government. We'll see how that plays out. Again, to recap, we think John Healey may be becoming the new Chancellor. That is a surprise. He resigned with dignity, of course, over the defence budget not being given enough money by the Treasury. Well, now he'll be in charge of the Treasury, tasked with finding that £5 billion more to fill the Defence Investment Plan. Also in there is Ed Miliband, possibly the new Foreign Secretary, and Shabana Mahmood possibly staying on as the Home Secretary. But there we have it. Louise Haigh, of course, she quit the government over that conviction over a lost mobile phone. We understood she had told Sir Keir Starmer about that in government, but when it emerged and was made public by a newspaper, she resigned. Formerly, she used to be, of course, the Transport Secretary. So Louise Haigh inside there, as I say, with John Healey, Ed Miliband and Shabana Mahmood in the building behind me, Martin.
Thank you very much, Chris. We'll get back to you as there's more people coming down that famous street. Back to the studios. Jacob Rees-Mogg, you've been inside these reshuffles, inside Downing Street. What's happening right now?
Well, it's very odd when you've been called in to see the Prime Minister, because he sees people, a queue builds up, and they use a succession of meeting rooms. So when I was first appointed, I was in one of the largest reception rooms in Downing Street, and it was me and a lot of chairs piled up. It wasn't particularly comfortable. They were very friendly and very nice, but everybody sits on his or her own. It's not a party atmosphere. Everyone's very segregated, and it gets delayed because people argue and they say, I don't want that job, I want a better job. And with this job, I want to have responsibility for that. So the Prime Minister thinks he's making an appointment, this is what you do. Cabinet Minister often thinks this is a negotiation.
OK, as we remind ourselves now, we have John Healey, Ed Miliband, Shabana Mahmood and Louise Haigh inside Downing Street there with the Prime Minister, of course, Andy Burnham. Let's remind ourselves now of some of the people who have been leaving the government this afternoon. Chris Hope keeps calling it the night of the long eyelashes, the Burnham bloodbath. Quick reminder, Rachel Reeves, former Chancellor, David Lammy, former Deputy PM and former Justice Secretary. We have also there Peter Kyle and the former Business Secretary and Steve Reed have all been sacked. or declined roles in Andy Burnham's cabinet, plus also Lord Richard Hermer, the former Attorney General, seen as the architect of the Chagos surrender, Liz Kendall, the former Science, Innovation and Tech Secretary, Joe Stevens there, the former Wales Secretary, and Darren Jones, the former Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. And let's remind ourselves of who has visited number 10 so far. Quick recap. Up the street first there was John Healey, of course, the former Defence Secretary, resigned in principle very recently after a $5 billion shortfall in the defence budget and was lauded and applauded across the chamber for doing so. Next up, we saw Shabana Mahmood walk up the street. The former Home Secretary tipped to maintain that brief, perhaps, is what we're hearing, to keep that hardline stance. Will Burnham's policy platform pass that Makerfield test? He keeps talking about. Also with her there, you can see Ed Miliband, of course, the current Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. Could there be a role, we've heard, in the Foreign Secretary? It's the safest place for Mr. Net Zero to send him on a global tour, as Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg says, while all the big decisions are actually made behind that door there in Downing Street. We've also seen Louise Haigh, the former Transport Secretary, enter number 10, but she's been tipped to be the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, for those who aren't aware of this fancy job title, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, what do they do?
Well, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is one of the oldest titles in British politics, and it controls, nominally on behalf of the King, his land in Lancashire, and reports to the King periodically in a private audience on this. But it's become the title used by the person running the Cabinet Office for the Prime Minister, and practically every big decision that is non-financial is taken by the Cabinet Office.
So it's a big role.
It's a really important role. It's one of the least understood and most important roles in government. So if Louise Haigh is getting that, somebody convicted of fraud is being brought in to run the Cabinet Office, I think that is a terrible thing to be doing. You want somebody there who is the epitome of probity.
Do you think that this appointment, if it is that, will have some very quick scrutiny about Andy Burnham's rationale? I mean, he might be very... Louise Haigh, we know, has been very, very loyal to him, but might it be flawed logic to point to be clearly has a criminal record?
Well, it's getting a bit like Lord Salisbury and Uncle Bob, or Bob's your uncle, in the Hotel Cecil. You appoint all your mates, all your friends, and you fire anybody who has supported your predecessor, and you appoint people even if they've had criminal records. Bear in mind, the Cabinet Office is responsible for tens of billions of pounds worth of procurement. Do you really want somebody who's been done for fraud in charge of tens of billions of pounds worth of procurement?
Lord McCabe, let's get you in at this point. Sir Jacob there saying it might be a mistake just to annihilate everybody who was a Starmer loyalist and get them all out. And might it be a mistake here, bringing Louise Haigh in?
Well, I don't think there's any question that Louise Haigh was going to be brought in. She was one of the two people who helped run the Makerfield by-election for him. She's been organising for him in Parliament for the last year or so. Bang on that she was going to get a job, and I would think Jacob described the Duchy of Lancaster job, but I mean, really, it's become the Prime Minister's enforcer in lots of respects as well these days, and that's the job I think she's going to get. She's going to be the person who's going to try and make sure his bidding is done, and not at all surprised that she's going to get quite a big and significant job. I'd like to know whether all these people are being sacked or whether some of them have decided they don't want to play anymore. And I think that may determine what the fortunes on the back benches will look like, because I think Jacob said earlier about having to be a bit generous. I wonder if he's been robbed a bit of that opportunity by people saying, well, you were part of a coup, you organised to do this, we don't want you to play. So, you know, I'm not entirely sure what's determining some of the cabinet and other jobs being offered, but my gut instinct tells me it's not going entirely as he might have hoped.
So, Jacob, from your experience in government, is that a thing that you recognise? For example, we heard that Rachel Reeves had been offered the position of defence and turned it down, and that would have made this reshuffle much more difficult for Andy Burnham.
What a dreadful idea that you fire the Chancellor because you think she hasn't been good enough as Chancellor, and you want to make her Secretary of State for Defence when the country is facing its biggest security crisis in decades. And this seems to me to be the height of irresponsibility. Had Rachel Reeves been the much-praised and lauded Chancellor, who everyone admired, to give her what is becoming the biggest job in government seems to me perfectly reasonable. But she was being fired, she has been fired for failure. And therefore to offer her defence shows contempt for the security of the nation. I think that's one of the worst blunders. And actually, you should be very grateful to Rachel Reeves that he's been saved from this really very shocking decision.
Tom Howard, you're following things very closely on social media. A flurry of information is coming. Who do we think might be walking next up that hallowed street?
That is a huge question, and one I don't think that I want to take a stab at guessing at this point. There are so many of them currently inside, and we haven't heard a single appointment yet. This is something I think that is worth dwelling on. The gilt markets, the bond markets, shall we say, that we've been talking about so much in the context of Andy Burnham. Well, gilt futures close at 6 o'clock today. Could it be that we're waiting to hear for the new Chancellor? Are we waiting for these markets to close before the new Chancellor is announced? It's a possibility. It's worth noting that Andy Burnham, in his brief huddle with the press immediately after becoming Prime Minister in the garden of Downing Street, was answering these sorts of questions that have given rise to the headlines about rent control and everything else. One of those questions that he answered was on the fiscal rules and whether he would follow them. He gave an answer that seemed to imply there was flexibility, and that seems to have spooked a lot of...
Tom, got to get straight back to Downing Street now. Our political editor Chris Hope's got more for us. Chris.
And then there were 9. 9 have fallen today. Hilary Benn has quit as the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. I don't see this as being linked to Keir Starmer. It seems he's going back to the backbenches. Hilary Benn, of course, the son of Tony Benn, says this: a great privilege to serve as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and to work with the many people, wonderful people, he says, over the past 2 years. So it looks to me like, well, Hilary Benn has gone in, which is his successor at the very best in working with the executive to protect stability, working to generate growth and investment in Northern Ireland, and in taking forward the Troubles Bill, so important for so many families. The PM will have my full support from the backbenches. So there you have it. That is the 9th person sacked or resigned from Keir Starmer's cabinet. We're going towards more than 1 in 3 of the team around Keir Starmer have gone. A dramatic day, the night of the long eyelashes. I'm going to call it that, Martin. I'm sure you like that too. I think that's what's going to happen next. But we do know that inside the building behind me are 4 politicians set to get some preferment under Andy Burnham. To recap who they are, we haven't seen anyone emerge yet, but we know that it is John Healey, Shabana Mahmood, Ed Miliband, and now Louise Haigh, who was expected to get a senior role in the Cabinet Office. But as I say, the 9th person has quit Keir Starmer's former cabinet. Hilary Benn out, back on the backbenches.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris Hope. We'll get back to you for more as the news breaks. Let's back to the studio. Just to recap there, the 9th casualty of this Burnham bloodbath today, Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary. Lord Steve McCabe, when that news came through there, you didn't seem that surprised. And a lot of people were quite critical of the fact. Recently, of course, Hilary Benn was deployed to Northern Ireland in the aftermath of that terrible stabbing, when there was a stabbing in Belfast. He got it a bit tin-eared, he got it a bit wrong.
Well, Hillary's served in government for a very long period of time now, so I'm not that surprised that he's going to the backbenches. I hear that, you know, the Troubles Bill is in some difficulty and it's not got quite the level of support in the backbenches maybe it requires. So I wonder if this is a way out for the new Prime Minister. And Hillary's the sort of person who would make that decision and go because he's a very decent and fair-minded sort of guy. So I wonder if this is an escape clause for Andy Burnham to try and have another bash at the Troubles issue, which is not popular.
So, Jacob, you're nodding effusively there.
Well, I think the Troubles Bill that he was promoting was a very bad bill, and that the very difficult compromise that had been reached by the previous government was one that was broadly workable. Nobody liked it, which was possibly a sign that it was fair and balanced, but the attempt to overturn it on the basis of an Irish government approach to the European communities, the European Convention on Human Rights, was a very bad idea and was causing a lot of trouble and distress to the families of veterans.
OK, if you're just joining us now, it is just before 6 minutes to 6. Michelle Dewberry is up next at your regular time of 6 p.m. But let's just have a quick recap on where we are today. Behind that door right now, we have the Prime Minister. The new Prime Minister, of course, sworn in today, Andy Burnham. With the first through the door today was John Healey. We're expecting him perhaps to be announced as the Chancellor in the next few minutes' time. Next down that hallowed street was Shabana Mahmood, tipped to remain in her position perhaps as the Home Secretary, the immigration enforcer, seen by many as the best bet the Labour Party has of attempting to control the nightmare of immigration that could decide the fate of this government, as it did the previous government before it. Ed Miliband was with Shabana Mahmood, tipped, we believe, to be the Foreign Secretary. The present Net Zero Secretary had been tipped to be a Chancellor. That sent the markets into a bit of a wobble. How can we have a Net Zero man go into the Chancellor when the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems we face, is spiralling energy bills? Drill, baby, drill might be a way out of that. And in these past few moments, Louise Haigh, the former Transport Minister, of course, was forced to resign in shame over a fraud allegation, a fraud charge, conviction over a mobile phone disappearance, tipped to be the next Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, a government enforcer. Quick recap on the bloodbath, the Burnham bloodbath, the night of the long eyelashes, as Chris Hope has been calling it all day. First out the door, Steve Reed resigned, the Housing Secretary, the first to fall. Next was David Lammy, the silence of the Lammy, perhaps finally coming, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Justice Secretary. Next up, Rachel Reeves, no longer the Chancellor of the Exchequer, rumoured to have turned down the defence brief, which Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg thought was absurd. He said, how can somebody who failed as the Chancellor be offered such an important role as defence? Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, many see as the architect of the Chagos surrender deal, straight through the trapdoor. Liz Kendall, the Department of Science and Innovation, another Starmer loyalist, through the trapdoor. Next up there is Joe Stevens, the former Welsh Secretary, another Starmer loyalist, through the trapdoor. And then also we have Darren Jones, who's the former Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, a very, very loyal Starmerist, through the trapdoor. And we've heard in these past few moments Hilary Benn, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, through the trapdoor. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, 9 down and 4 waiting to find out their fate behind that number 10 door.
It clearly hasn't gone as expected. The announcements were meant to be made much earlier, and the 9 down are almost all loyalists to Sir Keir Starmer. Burnham has said he wants to unite the party. You do not unite the party by firing all your predecessors' friends. I think he's made a fundamental error. It's not on policy, it's not on ideology, it's on the fact that they backed Starmer, that they've been chopped. And I think that will serve him ill.
Tom Harwood, and then there were 10.
Jenny Chapman is out. Now, this was expected, close ally of Keir Starmer, as all of the sackings seem so far. But she was working on international development, attending Cabinet. She's announced her resignation, saying in government, it's been a great honour to serve as International Development Minister and in Keir Starmer's Cabinet. I'm disappointed to be leaving, but wish the Prime Minister and his new team every success.
Lord McCabe, 10 gone in the space of... we have yet to hear a single appointment yet. This is one-way traffic.
Yeah, well, as I say, I'm not entirely convinced this has gone as intended. I think there's been a few hiccups along the way. Look, it's not such a terrible thing to have a big shift if you're trying to signal real change, and that is what he's going to.
Well, it is real change. It's got a higher body count.
That's what he's going to try to rely on. But the issue is what it stores up on the back benches, and I think that is the problem that really occurs. What happens tomorrow or next week, unless there's some major event, isn't that significant, because you can go out and portray it as change. This is real change. Change faces, change approach, but It's what gets stored up in the backbenches, and we've seen one Prime Minister who won an election with a commanding majority forced out because of what happened on the backbenches, and now we've got a whole lot of potential discontents on the backbenches.
Lord McCabe, you keep using that word change. Of course, the Keir Starmer came in on a manifesto of change. By Jove, there's been change. There's been all change. So, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is it change, or is it that old chestnut rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic?
Change and decay and all around I see, or Palmerston's line. What's this talk of change? Aren't things bad enough already? You can't change when you've got a majority of Labour MPs, of 170, a manifesto that you can't run away from, a fear of scrutiny, no willingness to talk to the press, and no willingness to have an election to get his own mandate. You can't get too far away from what they were elected on in 2024. They haven't got a new set of ideas, nor would there be any legitimacy in a new set of ideas. So there's a lot of talk of the hopey, changey stuff, but absolutely nothing's happening.
Lord Stephen McCabe, we've got a quick 40 seconds before we hand over to Michelle Dewberry. Has this been a good day or a bad day for Labour? It's certainly been all change, but it's been a bloodbath.
I think it will depend entirely on what is being said in the next 72 hours. I don't think it's been quite what he would have hoped for, but I mean, I'm not sure we should be. If you're a Labour supporter, I'm not sure we should be too despondent yet, but there are some worrying signals.
Thank you, Lord Steve McCabe. Thank you to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Thank you, Tom Harwood. I'll be back at 7 p.m, but next is the Queen of Primetime Debate, Tubes.